The reason why concocting pills was a difficult task was because it was difficult to control the temperature level. Should one use firewood to start the fire, it would be very difficult to control the heat level of the flames, let alone achieve the precision required to concoct pills. In theory, the higher the grade of alchemical pill, the stricter the requirements for controlling the fire. Precision aside, the alchemist also had to be able to stimulate the heat to an extreme level. The alchemist's cultivation had to be very high to achieve this. Ordinarily speaking, an alchemist should be able to concoct pills that are at most one level higher than his own cultivation level. For example, for Ling Han, who was in body refining tier, his limit should be concocting middle-level yellow-grade pills. However, the primary requirement was the ability to control fire. There were also certain requirements for the heat level, which was why too low a cultivation level would make concocting pills impossible, the minimum being the 7th layer of body refining tier. Ling Han was only in the 4th layer of body refining tier, and yet he dared to concoct a pill. The reason why he dared to do that lay in his spirit base. As he possessed the 5 elements mixed chaos lotus, the origin power within his body could be transformed to gold, wood, water, fire, or earth alignment. The heat level he could control was not really very high, the maximum level being 400 degrees, but it was enough to concoct the little cloud and water pill. It's worthy of the name 5 elements mix chaos lotus. The 5 elements are in a mutually dependent relationship with one another and seemingly inexhaustible. Ling Han praised silently. An ordinary fire alignment spirit base in the body refining tier would only be able to release flames that could reach the maximum temperature of 200 degrees. Even he who had had a pure fire alignment spirit base in his last life was no different. The 5 elements mixed chaos lotus could transform into any of the 5 elemental alignments, which was something that the 9 yang fire spirit base could never compare with. It was indeed worthy of the name of immortal grade spirit base. Ling Han's left hand continued to spin, heating every nook and cranny of the furnace. The heat required for various parts of the furnace was different. In future, to concoct high-grade alchemical pills would require a furnace with high specifications, such as the level of heat penetration and the level of heat endurance, to name a few of them. A good furnace was something over which any self-respecting alchemist would go to war. Occasionally, he would throw in one of the medicinal ingredients into the furnace. Sometimes he would open the lid of the furnace, while at others he would keep it closed. His practiced movements were carried out at such a fast speed that they would just be a blur in any observer's eyes. Lu Yutong, who had been standing at the side, was already speechless, her eyes wide. Thank goodness she wasn't an alchemist and so did not really have much of an understanding of this profession. Otherwise, if she had known that the lowest requirement for an alchemist's cultivation level was the 7th layer of body refining tier, then she would definitely be even more shocked. Then again, she was already shocked enough by now. A few more times and she might pass out due to extreme shock. The higher the temperature of the flames, the more origin power the alchemist had to use. Very quickly, Ling Han felt that he was nearing exhaustion. So he quickly tossed a return origin pill into his mouth, chewed it up, and immediately felt origin power enter his body bit by bit, allowing him to continue the process. Time passed slowly, and Ling Han continuously took return origin pills. After 2 hours, Ling Han suddenly gave a loud shout and bit his tongue, fresh blood spilling. Under the power of the lone wolf's blood, his origin power suddenly rose up to another level, causing the heat level of the flames to rise up to about 600 degrees. Pill completed. He suddenly retracted the flames. The final surge of the flames was the finishing touch that increased the effects of the alchemical pill by about 5%. Unfortunately, the 400-degree temperature was his limit. He could only injure himself to stimulate the lone wolf's blood if he wanted to release a heat of 600 degrees. He lifted the lid of the furnace and a faint medicinal fragrance instantly wafted out. Lu Yutong could not help coming closer to peek into the furnace. There were exactly 17 round, vermilion-colored pills inside. The surface of the pills sparkled temptingly, appearing almost translucent. Although she herself did not know anything about alchemy, she was certain that Ling Han had succeeded in concocting the pills. "You really are a freak," she said, a strange expression in her eyes. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "You'll get used to it soon. Lu Yutong wasn't sure whether she would become crazy or grow numb under the continuous assault of these miracles. Ling Han took a little cloud and water pill, swallowed it in one mouthful, and immediately began cultivation. Hong! The little cloud and water pill was like calcium oxide, whereas the environmental qi was like water. The encounter between the two immediately gave rise to a powerful reaction, leading to the assault of a terrifying amount of spiritual qi. The 5 elements mix chaos lotus within Ling Han's dantian stirred lightly, accepting the incoming qi and absorbing it at a frightening speed. Only an immortal-grade spirit base would be able to withstand such intensity. Ling Han thought while circulating 5 elements heaven-grade skill to transform the incoming spiritual qi into his own origin power, filling his limbs and veins with it. An hour later, the medicinal effects of the first little cloud and water pill were used up. Ling Han swallowed a second pill and continued cultivating. However, by the time the medicinal effects of the third little cloud and water pill were used up as well, Ling Han's tolerance level had also reached its limits. He felt extremely tired, and the upper half of his body immediately toppled over as he fell asleep on the floor right where he was. Lu Yutong, who had been beside him all the while, could not help shaking her head. She then helped Ling Han onto the bed and attentively took off his shoes and covered him with the quilt. She then exited the inner chamber and fell asleep on a chair in the outer chamber. She was a very responsible follower whose main duty was to protect Ling Han. The night passed. When Ling Han opened his eyes, the first thing he saw was the canopy of his bed, which caused him to be slightly surprised because he had no recollection of climbing onto the bed last night. But this was not important. He smiled, because his cultivation level had once again risen to a new level as he broke through to the 5th layer of body refining tier. The reason why he could break through 2 layers yesterday was because the past cultivation rate of this body was too slow. The first time the 5 elements mix Chaos Lotus was active at full power naturally led to a one-time eruption. Of course, this would not happen again in future. You've broken through again. When Ling Han stepped out of the internal chamber, Lu Yutong immediately looked as if she had seen a ghost. She was even stumbling over her words, her eyes fixed in a stare directed at Ling Han. This is only the body refining tier, this speed is normal, Ling Han said, completely calm. Hell, it's normal. Lu Yutong was about to go crazy. In any case, as someone who had a heaven-grade spirit base, she spent 10 days to break through to the 2nd layer of body refining tier once she stepped onto the path of a cultivator. As for breaking through from the 4th layer to the 5th layer of body refining tier, it took her 25 days. How could 25 days' time compare to a single night? You're not going to break through to the 6th layer of body refining tier tomorrow, are you? Lu Yutong asked suddenly. Ling Han thought for a moment, before he shook his head and said, no. Hearing this, Lu Yutong finally released the breath she was holding. If Ling Han said yes, she really might have gone crazy. I should be able to the day after tomorrow, Ling Han continued after a slight pause. Monster. He had to be a monster. Lu Yutong stared at him resentfully, determined that she would never try to guess this guy's cultivation speed again. Anyways, she decided she would just pretend that he's a monster so that no matter what speed he cultivated with, she would not think it strange in any way. Ling Han laughed. After having breakfast, he once again began cultivating behind closed doors. However, there were limits to one's vitality. He could not possibly cultivate without end. Thus, even if he had started cultivation during daytime, in truth, it did not really increase his cultivation speed by much. However, he was now fighting against time, so it'd be good even if there was only a minuscule increase in his cultivation speed. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong's progress was also extremely rapid. With the aid of a heaven-grade cultivation skill, she would be able to reach the peak period of the 9th layer of element gathering tier within 2 months at most, and even she herself was in a state of disbelief over this kind of cultivation speed. Lu Yutong had once believed that she had to be 19 or even 20 years old before she could break through to Gushing Spring tier. This was already quite fast. In the whole history of Rain Country, there were very, very few that could compare with her. But now, she had a very high chance of breaching this gap at the age of 18. Even though it was only the difference of 2 years, just how old was she? It would be shocking enough for a cultivator of her age to speed up his or her breakthrough by a few months. but she had sped up her breakthrough by 2 whole years. This was all because of Ling Han. However, when you compare this kind of progression rate with Ling Han's own, then it really was nothing worth mentioning. From the 2nd layer to the 4th layer of body refining tier, he spent 1 night. From the 4th layer to the 5th layer of body refining tier, 1 night. From the 5th layer to the 6th layer of body refining tier, 2 nights. When others talk about cultivating, they'd be talking about months or even years spent cultivating. But for Ling Han, his cultivation rate was counted in days. He was such a freak. Ling Han only laughed and said, "This cultivation speed can't really be considered fast. There are some demonic beasts that are already element gathering tier at birth. Some are even gushing spring tier. These creatures are in existence that have been blessed by the heavens. Are there really such demonic beasts?" Lu Yutong's beautiful eyes widened. There were actually demonic beasts that were even stronger at birth than she was now. Of course. Ling Han nodded. He paused, then continued, "I have seen historical records depicting that some demonic beasts, which are already extinct, were even at heaven tier at birth. They were born invincible." Lu Yutong did not believe him. She asked, "Since they were already in heaven tier at birth, then why would they become extinct? The world has its own rules. Who would be able to fight against time?" Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, it was because he did not want to just die and rot that he had resolutely stepped onto a dangerous path, seeking a way to break through to shattering void tier. There are too many mysteries on this land that can easily erase even those in heaven tier. In his previous life, when he had been a powerful existence of heaven tier, there were many places that he dared not venture to, fearing that he could fall from the sky at every turn there. After 2 days of hard cultivation, Ling Han exerted more effort to complete accumulating in the 5th layer of body refining tier. He then easily reached the 6th layer of body refining tier. Because he had already walked this familiar path in his last life, the comprehension of his cultivation was a problem that he needed not think about. However, from the 6th layer to the 7th layer of body refining tier, this is a tiny little leap. 3 days won't be enough. I'd need 4 days or maybe even 5 days' time. Ling Han gave a sigh. He'd just have to continue working hard at cultivation for another 4 or 5 days. Beside him, Lu Yutong, who had been listening to Ling Han's resentful complaints, experienced a sudden impulse to go crazy. This freak! 1 day later, Ling Han had reached the early period of the 6th layer of body refining tier. On the 2nd day, he had already reached the middle period. On the 3rd day, he was in the late period. On the 4th day, he had achieved the peak of the 6th layer of body refining tier. He did not drag it into the 5th day. Ling Han began to break through and, less than an hour later, he had stepped into the 7th layer of body refining tier. A 16-year-old with the cultivation of 7th layer of body refining tier. In Rain Country, such a cultivator would be considered acceptable. Moreover, if anyone was told that Ling Han had been in the 2nd layer of body refining tier and spent 8 days to break through to the 7th layer of body refining tier, they would definitely not believe it. Thus, even Lu Yutong, who had observed the whole process, was absent-minded, her expression distant. When she walked, her movements made it look like she was floating on air. She had truly been shocked. "I can finally go out," Ling Han stretched. Now that he had a youthful body, his mentality too became youthful. After being confined to his chamber for 7 days, he felt as if he was a fierce tiger that had been imprisoned. "Let's go see father. The Chung clan should have acted by now," he murmured. It was quite coincidental. Although Ling Dongxing had been so busy that he was nowhere to be found these few days, today he happened to be sitting in his study. However, his mood appeared to be very bad. His brows wrinkled in a deep frown. "Father, I guess the Chung clan has made their move?" Ling Han asked directly. Ling Dongxing did not raise his head to look at him. He only gave a nod, continuing to write something on a piece of paper. "Is the situation very bad?" Ling Han asked. Ling Dongxing heaved a sigh before finally putting his pen down and saying, "It's very bad. Though our Ling clan has numerous properties, there are only 2 that are most profitable to the clan. One is the mine, the other is the medicine shop." Ling Han knew that the Ling clan owned a copper mine. The ownership of this mine fell into the hands of the Ling clan only 30 years ago. The Ling clan had paid an extremely heavy price to obtain this mine, as many powerful warriors of the clan had died in the process. As for the medicine shop, it would purchase lower-grade medicinal pills from Heaven's Medicine Pavilion and resell them to customers at a price a little higher than the original price. Although this was only a simple purchase and resale trade, because there was an enormous market for medicinal pills, this was a major source of income for the clan. The actual profit from selling each pill might have been small, but the number of transactions more than made up for it. The weakness of the medicine shop was that it completely relied on the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. However, because the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion wanted to maintain a mutually beneficial relationship with the locally influential parties, the two great clans of the town could each obtain some pills to sell. 5 days ago, our mine had been attacked by an unknown party, leading to quite a few casualties. Now everyone is in a state of anxiety. Even though we increased wages, there are not many who are willing to enter the mine. Ling Dongxing continued to say. Furthermore, Alchemist Ma from the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion had suddenly started making things difficult for us. He said that the batch of medicinal pills sent from headquarters this time has been delayed on the road for some reason, and the delivery will be late. Now, our stock of pills in the warehouse is close to being completely sold out. If the situation continues and we still aren't able to restock, then the medicine shop can only be temporarily closed. Once the medicine shop closed its doors, the shop's reputation would definitely be affected. Even if it once again opened its doors to do business in the future, some customers would definitely be lost. These 2 days, our finances are already a bit tight. We must figure out something as quick as possible. Ling Dongxing sighed. Although the Ling clan was a large existence with various properties, their expenses were also very large. There was a saying, the poor practice cultural arts while the rich practice martial arts. Cultivation was an extremely expensive endeavor. And now, the two key businesses of the Ling clan were hit at the same time. Thus the clan funds immediately became tight. If things went on like this, there would be big trouble. In fact, they may even be forced to sell off some of their less important businesses. It's done by the Chung clan, Ling Han said immediately, very certain. Ling Dongxing nodded. Their two greatest businesses encountered difficulties at the same time. There could never be such a huge coincidence in this world. He tapped his finger once on the table and said, "There's also a traitor." Ling Han's eyes became cold, and he said, "Ling Zhongquan." That's right. He did not plan to conceal anything from his own son. He scoffed. Once something happened to the mine, I immediately increased the numbers of the patrolling party. Yet they didn't even spot the enemy. Unless someone had leaked the patrolling routes beforehand, how could this be possible? It was likely that once Ling Zhongquan heard that Xianxia and his brother had both been thrashed, he had secretly met with Cheng Wen and reached some kind of agreement with the latter. Most likely it was to have Cheng clan aid him in snatching the position of clan head. Though only he himself knew what kind of humiliating terms he'd agreed to in exchange for their assistance. I've made a lunch appointment with Alchemist Ma of the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. I'd definitely have to give him some benefits. Otherwise, the clan would really be in a big trouble. Ling Dongxing continued to say. Alchemist Ma. Ma de Jun? Ling Han could not help the strange expression on his face, as he said, I'll accompany you, father. Your duty now is to concentrate on cultivation, unless you reach the 7th layer of body PU. Ling Dongxing finally raised his head to look directly at Ling Han. This one look caused him to choke, his expression slack. Had Lu Yutong seen his reaction, she would definitely feel very comforted. She couldn't very well be the only person to be shocked by Ling Han's cultivation speed, right? Han, you've already reached the 7th layer of body refining tier. Ling Dongxing stammered. If someone had told him in the past that one day he would be shocked speechless by someone in the 7th layer of body refining tier, he'd definitely give the speaker a good solid slap. But now, it was himself he wanted to give a good solid slap to make sure that the sight before him was real and he wasn't merely dreaming. Yes, so you do not have to worry anymore, father? Ling Han smiled. Ling Dongxing's face twitched, but after a while, he could not stop himself from laughing long and loud. It was as if all the worries that had troubled his mind these few days had evaporated. His son had shown such promise, what else did he need to worry about? Good son, good son. He was unbearably excited. He finally believed that his son truly had the ability to help him rescue his wife. Then, tonight we'll head to the dinner together, Ling Dongxing said with a nod. Now that his son was showing more and more promise, the position of clan head definitely would be passed down to his son in future. Thus it'd be good to have Ling Han follow by his side and learn through observation. Ling Han kept up the smile on his face. When he imagined Alchemist Ma seeing him later tonight, he could practically see the thunderstruck expression on the latter's face. That night, Ling Dongxing and his son, accompanied by 4 attendants, arrived at Xianyu House. This was where Ling Dongxing had invited Alchemist Ma for dinner. While they were waiting in one of the private rooms of the restaurant, Ling Dongxing and Ling Han talked with each other. Pang! The door was suddenly pushed open, and 2 people entered. They were Ling Zhongquan and Ling Muyun. What are the 2 of you doing here? Ling Dongxing said coldly. The clan is in such big trouble. How could I not come? Ling Zhongquan did not wait to be invited before sitting down and saying to Ling Dongxing, I'd advise you to step back from this issue and leave this matter for me to handle. You? Ling Dongxing laughed coldly and said, Why? You must have offended Alchemist Ma in some way. Otherwise, how could it be that he would make trouble for our clan for no reason? Ling Zhongquan spoke slowly, then gesturing at Ling Muyun said, This boy went to be examined yesterday. He has a great potential for fire control. Thus, he has already been accepted by Alchemist Ma as an apprentice. After a few years' hard work, Alchemist Ma would take him in as an official disciple. In the future, he would become an alchemist. Ling Muyun walked up to stand proudly beside Ling Zhongquan. There was immeasurable pride on his face. After the trouble caused by Ling Han, he had lost the chance to enroll into Huyang Academy. But who would have thought that when a door closed, a window would open? He actually had a great potential for fire control, so there was a high chance that he would become an alchemist in future. Alchemist, the most powerful, most noble profession in the whole of Grey Cloud Town. No, the whole of Rain Country. Ling Zhongquan was very proud. His 2 sons weren't even able to compare with Ling Dongxing. But that was all right, for his grandson was much, much more outstanding than Ling Han. Pooh! He looked closely at Ling Han for a moment before suddenly gasping in shock. This, what was this? The 7th layer of body refining tier? No, he must have seen wrongly. How could Ling Han be in the 7th layer of body refining tier? Ling Zhongquan could not help rubbing his eyes a few times and taking another close look at Ling Han. However, the powerful air around Ling Han was still the same. 7th layer of body refining tier through and through. Did this brat take some kind of godly medicine? Ling Zhongquan could not control the violent twitching of his wrinkled face. He had truly experienced a tremendous shock. Grandfather, are you all right? Ling Muyun felt that his grandfather was behaving very oddly. Weren't they supposed to strut around now, rubbing the fact that he was going to become an alchemist in the faces of Ling Dongxing and his son? Why was his grandfather suddenly acting so silly? 7th layer of body refining tier. Ling Zhongquan stuttered out. That's right, Ling Muyun was in the 7th layer of body refining tier. What was so strange about that? Didn't he already know that? Ling Muyun looked strangely at Ling Zhongquan. Why was his grandfather suddenly behaving so abnormally? Not you, him, Ling Zhongquan said, pointing at Ling Han. Pooh! Ling Muyun gasped in shock. 7th layer of body refining tier? What kind of joke was this? In the clan, every member knew Ling Han's infamous reputation as a piece of trash. He had cultivated for many years, and yet had only managed to reach the 2nd layer of body refining tier. Otherwise, why else would he be labeled as trash in the clan? If Ling Han, who was now in the 7th layer of body refining tier, was considered a piece of trash, then what about him, who had only reached the 7th layer of body refining tier at 18? Was he the ultimate piece of trash? Impossible. This is definitely impossible, he muttered in complete disbelief. But he knew very well that his grandfather was in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so there was no way he could be mistaken. Haha, what do you think of my son now? Not bad, right? Ling Dongxing laughed heartily. This kind of natural talent should be good enough to enroll in the Huyang Academy, right? Hearing these words, Ling Zhongquan and his grandson's expressions became even uglier. They took advantage of the fact that Ling Dongxing was a way to force Ling Han to give up the chance to enroll into Huyang Academy, and the result was running into a stone wall. Ling Dongxing was deliberately mentioning the Huyang Academy to taunt them with it. Ling Muyun was still very young, thus he couldn't remain composed and said, "What's the big deal about Huyang Academy? I have entered the world of alchemists now, and I will become the most respected man in Rain Country in the future. Is that so?" Ling Han shook his head and said, "I can guarantee that you will never become an alchemist's apprentice, so of course, you will never become an alchemist either. Ha 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 ha. Who do you think you are? Do you actually think you can influence Alchemist Ma's decision?" Ling Muyun laughed coldly. He felt this was the biggest joke in the world. If Ling Han really had such ability, then why would Alchemist Ma purposely cause trouble and delay the distribution of alchemical pills for the clan? Ling Han did not say anything else. He only smiled. After all, things would become clear later. However, even Ling Dongxing himself did not take Ling Han's threat seriously. In his opinion, although his son had truly displayed a great natural talent in the field of martial arts, he couldn't possibly have any relations with Alchemist Ma. Although the 4 of them all belonged to the Ling clan, they were mutually antagonistic, so how could they possibly have any common topics to converse with each other? After the short verbal battle, they each kept silent, waiting for the arrival of Alchemist Ma. However, this Alchemist Ma really liked to put on airs. After a long time, he still had not appeared. When they were nearing the limits of their patience, they finally heard footsteps from outside the door. Ji! The door opened, and a medium-sized man entered. This man could only be Alchemist Ma. There was only one alchemist in the whole of Grey Cloud Town. Even more so, only one surnamed Ma. Ling Dongxing, Ling Zhongquan, and Ling Muyun all stood up, grasping their fists in greeting. Ling Muyun even bent and knelt in front of the newcomer and said respectfully, "Disciple Muyun hereby greets Master." An alchemist's apprentice could barely be counted as half an alchemist's disciple. "You may rise." Ma Dejun casually waved his hands and nodded at Ling Dongxing, saying, "You don't have to waste your time on pleasantries. Let's just get down to business. I'm a very busy man." Ling Han, how dare you not greet Alchemist Ma? Ling Muyun immediately pointed at Ling Han. He had very sharp eyes and had immediately noticed that Ling Han had not greeted Alchemist Ma. He was even just sitting there as if nothing important was going on. Ling Dongxing was very surprised. The reason he had invited Alchemist Ma to dinner tonight was to curry favor with the man and solve the medicine supply problem. But now Ling Muyun had taken advantage of and directly pointed out this weakness. Were things going to turn bad? He could not help getting angry in secret. The important thing was to settle the problem that the Ling clan was facing now. How could Ling Muyun be so petty? He suddenly felt that he really wanted to kill this little brat in one blow. Hey! He really doesn't know the rules of the game. Ling Zhongquan too harumphed. Ling Muyun had very fortunately taken hold of Ling Han's weakness, so he naturally would not easily give it up. He continued aggressively. "Alchemist is the most respected, most dignified profession in the whole of Rain Country. Yet you not only did not stand up to greet my master upon his arrival, but also continue to remain seated? How arrogant can you be? Kneel down quickly and beg my master for a punishment." Ling Dongxing frowned slightly. Alchemists were indeed very rare and held a high status in Rain Country. For example, even though this Ma Dejun was only in the 9th layer of body refining tier, as he was a yellow-grade medium-level alchemist, even strong warriors of the element gathering tier like himself and Ling Zhongquan had to show him some face and satisfy Ma Dejun's ego. Now that Ling Zhongquan and his grandson had taken advantage of this point to attack Ling Han, he really might encounter some trouble. Clasping his fists, Ling Dongxing said, "Alchemist Ma, many apologies. If my son has done anything to offend you, I hereby apologize on his behalf. As a forgiving, generous man, Please do not lower yourself to the same level as my son. Ma Dejun hadn't even noticed Ling Han. He only found out what was going on after hearing Ling Muyun's reprimand, so he couldn't control his rising dissatisfaction and said, Ling clan head, you're really quite incredible. You invited me to dinner, so I offered you due respect by coming here. Yet you actually allow your son to humiliate me? Snort. What kind of logic is this? Ling Han, kneel down now. Ling Muyun smiled coldly. He knew very well that alchemical pills were one of the most important source of income for the clan. Thus, even if Ling Dongxing did not want to, he had no choice but to concede on this issue and pressure Ling Han to do as told. Forced to kneel by his own old man, Ling Han would definitely be very depressed and unbearably sorrowful. Wouldn't he? Ha 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 ha. Alchemist Ling Dongxing tried again to advise Ma Dejun to let things go. Ma Dejun only raised his hand to stop Ling Dongxing from continuing to speak. He did not even look at Ling Han and only said casually, Let your son kneel down in front of me to explain. Pang! Ling Dongxing slammed his hand heavily down on the table and said, Alchemist Ma, I do not know what benefits you have received from the Cheng clan to help them make trouble for our Ling clan. But don't you dare go too far. You actually want my Ling Dongxing's son to kneel down? Get lost. How dare you? Ling Zhongquan immediately shouted loudly. Ling Dongxing, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to bring ruin to the clan? The clan does not just belong to you alone. As someone who does not care about the big picture, what right do you have to continue to hold onto the position of clan head of the Ling clan? Ling Dongxing's gaze turned heavy, and he said, Who of those here is the one who does not care about the big picture? Because I considered the fact that we share the same surname of Ling, there were some things that I did not bring out into the open, yet you all bully my son in this manner. Do you really think I, Ling Dongxing, am already dead? Enough, if you're going to engage in a family squabble, then have your argument at home. I'm a very busy man, Ma Dejun interrupted. Quickly make this brat kneel down in front of me in apology. Ma Dejun, who are you asking to kneel? Ling Han finally opened his mouth as he asked calmly. Ma Dejun? At first, Ling Zhong and Ling Muyun were both shocked, thinking secretly that Ling Han was really gutsy to actually call Alchemist Ma directly by his name. Yet immediately, they looked extremely pleased Ling Han had completely offended Ma Dejun now. Ling Dongxing and his son were definitely finished. Haha. I knew that this brat would bring ruin to his father. You trash. To actually call my master by his name directly. How dare you? Ling Muyun immediately shouted. He definitely had to take advantage of such a grand opportunity to flatter Ma Dejun. However, he had not seen that Ma Dejun's expression quickly turned ugly. He had even stood up from his seat immediately. This voice. How could Ma Dejun ever forget this voice? Kneel down dash, pa! Ling Muyun did not even manage to finish his words before seeing Ma Dejun fly towards him like an arrow shot from a bow. Raising his hand and giving him a heavy slap, Ling Muyun was slapped utterly stupid. Even Ling Dongxing and Ling Zhongquan had vacant expressions, staring blankly. If Ma Dejun wanted to hit someone, then shouldn't he be slapping Ling Han? Why had he suddenly slapped Ling Muyun instead? There must be some kind of mistake. Ma, master. Ling Muyun's expression practically screamed that he felt wronged. Why was he suddenly hit? Under the three observers' uncomprehending stares, Ma Dejun quickly raced to stand in front of Ling Han. Bowing, he lowered his head respectfully as if he was an obedient little lackey and said, So the noble guest today was young Master Han. Please forgive my blindness for not managing to notice young Master Han just now. Although he had suffered a great deal because of Ling Han, he had no idea what his name was. Zhu He Xian naturally had no need to explain anything to him. What? The other three members of the Ling clan all entered into petrified mode. Was this really the extremely arrogant, high and mighty alchemist Ma from just moments ago? Why did they suddenly feel like he had become a pug dog? Furthermore, why did he address Ling Han young Master Han? Although Ma Dejun's actual cultivation level could not be considered very high, he was an alchemist. And an alchemist always commanded great respect and dignity. The other three felt as if they had been petrified. They could not believe what they were seeing and hearing at all. "This is your disciple? How overbearing," Ling Han said, looking at Ling Han. His tone was extremely serene. However, Ma Dejun was shocked half to death. Once more, he gave another solid slap to Ling Muyun and said, "Who do you think you are, to actually be so impolite to young Master Han? I have no such disciple. From now onwards, do not address me as your master." Ling Muyun immediately put on an expression of disbelief. He had been chased out? Just because of one word from Ling Han? He recalled that Ling Han had just told him that he would never become an alchemist. Those words actually came true. "No, master. Please do not chase me away. Please give me another chance," Ling Muyun pleaded earnestly, quickly throwing himself to Ma Dejun's feet. He was not a martial arts genius, and had even lost the chance to enroll at Huyang Academy. Thus, becoming an alchemist was his last chance. Otherwise, he would have to be just like his father and grandfather. The strongest he could become would only be element-gathering tier, and he'd have a certain status only in the very small, very remote gray cloud town. "Get lost. You dared to be impolite to young Master Han. I was already being merciful by not killing you, and you actually fancy that you are going to be an alchemist." Ma Dejun snorted. Even Zhu He Xin, Grandmaster Zhu, was extremely respectful facing Ling Han. If he knew that Ling Muyun actually dared to take such an attitude towards Ling Han, he may even rush over here to kill this brat with his own hands. And with one word from Grandmaster Zhu, which alchemist in the whole of Rain Country would dare to take Ling Muyun as a disciple? Ling Muyun could not control the ashen expression on his face. He was dazed, looking as if he had lost his soul. "Let's go." Ling Zhongquan took hold of his grandson. He knew there was no use saying anything now. It was better for them to leave before they embarrassed themselves further. "No, I'm an alchemist's apprentice. I will become an alchemist in the future." Ling Muyun struggled with all his might, as if he had gone mad. But Ling Zhongquan held him tightly. Those still remaining in the private room could only hear the screams getting farther and farther away before they finally disappeared. In the private room, Ling Dongxing looked dumbstruck, while Ma Dejun was drenched in cold sweat. He did not know if he had managed to soothe Ling Han's anger. He really dared not offend this young master. "Just now you were quite fierce facing my father," Ling Han said calmly, yet there was a strong dissatisfaction in his voice. "Young Master Han, I had no idea just now that Ling Clan head was your father. Otherwise, I would never dare to put on airs in front of Ling Clan head." He spoke with a pained expression. "I deserve death. I really am worthless." He strengthened his resolve, and actually started to slap himself repeatedly. Ling Dongxing was already completely numb. He knew that his own son was a genius now. But to actually be someone whom an alchemist would fawn on and painstakingly curry favor with, this still caused him to be incomparably shocked. Before, Ma Dejun's attitude was one full of arrogance, superiority, and condescending. He had invited Ma Dejun repeatedly before the man finally agreed to come, and yet the first thing the latter did upon coming was to seek flaws and create problems. He had truly displayed the arrogance of an alchemist to the full extent. But now, he really dared not believe that Ma Dejun would actually treat him with such respect and courtesy. These few days that he was gone, what had actually happened to cause his son to change so much? "Ling Clan head, I truly deserve death. Please do not worry. I shall have someone deliver the medicine to you as soon as I return," Ma Dejun said very gently and cautiously. Once he recalled his previous attitude towards Ling Dongxing, he could not control the rapid beating of his heart. He was scared half to death now. Ling Han tapped one finger on the table and said, "Is it the Chung clan that had you do such a thing?" "Hee, young Master Han, I really didn't know that Ling Clan head was your father, and so fell under the deception of the Chung clan." "You must believe me," Ma Dejun explained hurriedly. Ling Han smiled and said, "I believe you." Ma Dejun immediately felt elated. But then he heard Ling Han continue to speak. "You're a greedy man. Going by your personality and character, How could you actually deign to help the Chung clan without sufficient benefits? Tell me then, what benefits have you received from the Chung clan? This Ma Dejun stuttered. But once he saw Ling Han's sharp gaze, he tensed up and hurriedly said, 30,000 silver coins. The Chung clan is really generous. Ling Dongxing snorted. As the head of clan, he had a deep understanding of the significance of 30,000 silver coins. The Chung clan and the Ling clan were very similar in that they both had shockingly large income, yet their spending was also extremely large. A sum of 30,000 silver coins could only be painstakingly saved up over 2-3 years' time. That the Chung clan was willing to use such an astronomical sum to hire Ma Dejun meant they were completely serious in their attempt to utterly cut off the Ling clan's lifeblood. Just as Ling Han said, Ma Dejun was a greedy man. To let him once again supply Ling clan with medicine, they would have to offer him a reward that exceeded 30,000 silver coins. But the problem was that after the Ling clan had been hit twice, they had practically expended all money they had available. So where would they be able to find 30,000 silver coins to bribe Ma Dejun with? This move may have been only a little wound to the Chung clan, but for the Ling clan it would definitely be a fatal injury. Thank goodness he had a good son. Ling Dongxing could not help smiling. The Chung clan would never have thought that the 30,000 silver coins they had handed over was practically wasted. 30,000 coins, that's quite a lot. Ling Han looked at Ma Dejun with a faint smile. Alchemists really are quite expensive. They had to spend such an amount to be able to bribe you. Young Master Han, you jest. Ma Dejun wiped away the cold sweat beading on his forehead. He was not an idiot, so naturally he could tell that Ling Han was being sarcastic. Because of you, our Ling clan really have suffered a huge loss these few days, Ling Han said serenely. Ma Dejun immediately shivered, but a flash of inspiration passed through his brain and he hurriedly said, although the mastermind is the Cheng clan, it is undeniable that I too am responsible to some extent. Thus, allow me to hand over these 30,000 silver coins to the Ling clan to compensate for the losses the Ling clan has suffered. Ling Dongxing was astounded. A man as greedy as Ma Dejun would actually hand over the monetary bribe that he had long received? Just how terrified was he of his son? Ling Han nodded and said, this isn't a problem for you, right? How could it be? Although he felt as if his heart was bleeding, Ma Dejun was all smiles and said in embarrassment, this is something I ought to do, and it is a small token of my feelings. All right then. Ling Han nodded. I need you to do something for me. Young Master Han, say it and it shall be done. Ma Dejun pandered to him. From tomorrow onwards, have the portion of pills usually given to the Chung clan be supplied to our Ling clan for resale, Ling Han said. When Ling Dongxing heard this, he immediately felt ecstatic. Alchemical pills were one of the two largest sources of income for the Ling clan. If they could get double the amount of their supplies, then their profits would also double accordingly. At the same time, the income of the Chung clan would be halved. Should this last for a few years, then the overall power of the Chung clan would soon fall very far from the power of the Ling clan, while the Ling clan would be able to completely defeat the Chung clan and become the most important clan in Grey Cloud Town, and also the only great clan in the town. Yes, of course, Ma Dejun replied quickly. After all he needed to do was to issue the necessary commands. He would suffer no personal loss on his part. I don't need to give you some kind of benefits in exchange, Ling Han said with a smile. Ho ho, young Master Han, you're really such a joker, Ma Dejun said with a dry laugh. All right, there's nothing else that I need you for, so you can go on and do your job. Ling Han nodded, sending Ma Dejun off. Why not have dinner first before leaving? Ling Dongxing said politely. After all, Ma Dejun was going to do something for them. Ma Dejun naturally dared not stay. He hurriedly waved his hands and said, no need, no need. I should go ahead and get to work. He raised his clasped hands towards Ling Han and then towards Ling Dongxing while stepping backwards at the same time till he left the room. Honor. Wouldn't treating him in this manner backfire? Ling Dongxing said. After all, Ma Dejun was still an alchemist. They didn't give him any kind of monetary benefits and Ling Han was even rude to him. Please don't worry, father. That guy is the type that fears the strong and bullies the weak. Give him an inch and he'll take a mile, Ling Han said with a smile. Ling Dongxing did not ask Ling Han why Ma Dejun had been so fearful of and respectful towards him. His son was already all grown up, and so he naturally had his own secrets. As a father, the only thing he needed to do was to support him. Moreover, he also had to start preparing for the next step. Now, it was time for their counterattack. Alchemist Ma. Seeing Ma Dejun come out, Ling Zhongquan and his grandson emerged from the shadows, waving over at him. The grandfather and grandson duo did not depart after they'd left the restaurant. Instead, they remained in wait here. In front of Ling Han, Ma Dejun acted like a pug dog. Yet, in front of others, he immediately recovered his arrogant demeanor. He snorted and said, "Do you have something to discuss with me? Alchemist Ma, you see, Mu Yun and Ling Han are brothers of the same clan. Shouldn't you be more accommodating and allow Mu Yun to continue to learn alchemical arts with you?" Ling Zhongquan said with a flattering smile. Yet Ma Dejun only laughed and said, "Chief Butler Ling, I cannot decide on this issue. If you want your grandson to become an alchemist in the future, then you must first obtain young Master Han's approval. Otherwise, it's useless even if you find another alchemist. No one would dare to take your grandson as a disciple." What? Ling Zhongquan and his grandson both wore an expression of utter disbelief. How could a mere piece of trash have such power? You can choose not to believe me, but this has nothing to do with me, so please do not drag me into this affair. Ma Dejun waved his hand. However, I will still offer you a word of advice. Do not oppose young Master Han on any account. Furthermore, you have no idea how fortunate you are. They were all members of Ling clan. There was no such thing as eternal enmity among family. As long as they sincerely apologized to Ling Dongxing and his son, then how could it be that they would not receive any benefits in the future? After all, Ling Han was a man that even Grandmaster Zhu He Xian, treated with respect. Just as Ma Dejun had said, this matter had nothing to do with him. So once he said what he wanted to say, he quickly departed. He still had to complete the task that Ling Han had commanded him to do. "Grandfather, are we really going to do as he had said and obey Ling Dongxing and his son's commands without questions?" Ling Mu Yun asked, gritting his teeth. How could he resign himself to do such a thing? Ling Han was a well-known piece of trash, and for him to actually obey the commands of a piece of trash, just the mere thought of him made him feel stupid. Of course not. Ling Zhongquan strongly waved his hand. I've worked so hard all these years. How could I allow a piece of trash to ruin all my hard effort? Whether that brat is a real piece of trash or had just been pretending to be one. There is no way that he can stand in the way of me taking over our Ling clan. But grandfather, what is our next move? Ling Mu Yun appeared very dazed. Wait, Ling Zhongquan said in a deep voice. The relations between Chang clan and us are very tense now. Even though Ling Dongxing can counterattack with Ma Dejun's help, the Chang clan is not easily trifled with. Force them into a corner and they would definitely put their all into the fight. At that moment, we will give Ling Dongxing an additional stab in the back and shove him off the position of the clan head. Ling Muyun's face lit up upon hearing this, but his eyes were filled with a poisonous rage. Grandfather, that brat Ling Han must be handed over to me. I want to kill him with my own hands. You will definitely get your wish, Ling Zhongquan said with a cold smile. The next morning, Zhu He Xian once again visited the Ling clan. Now Ling Dongxing finally understood why Ma Dejun had been so reverent towards his son. It was because even a black-grade alchemist such as Zhu He Xian would stand with both hands at his sides in front of his son. The epitome of an obedient student. This solved the mystery yet caused Ling Dongxing to be even more shocked. Because in the last case it was only a yellow-grade alchemist, but now even a black-grade alchemist was so reverent towards his son. What was going on here? The reason behind Zhu He Xian's visit was to pass on some news to Ling Han. There was news that a stalk of earth dragon grass may have appeared on 7 Wind Mountains. When Liu Tong had gone to purchase the ingredients for concocting the little cloud and water pill a few days ago, she had also asked Zhu He Xian about the ingredients for another pill formula. This pill formula had a total of 4 ingredients that belonged to the extremely rare category. Even Heaven's Medicine Pavilion did not have any of these ingredients in stock. Or rather, the branch in Rain Country did not have them in stock. However, based on his current rank, Zhu Hexian had no way of checking the stock of the bigger branches, not to mention transferring something over. This pill formula was the formula required to concoct a pill to heal Ling Dongxing's spirit base. The name of the pill was Restore Spirit Pill, an Earth-grade medium-level pill. Earth Dragon Grass was one of the 4 missing ingredients this pill formula required. Thus, once he received this piece of new, Zhu Hexian quickly came to personally visit the Ling residence. Of course, while one reason was to inform Ling Han of the important news, he also wanted to come and seek guidance from Ling Han. At other times, he would not dare to come and disturb Ling Han. Ling Han was naturally elated. But after he had carefully asked about the circumstances surrounding the 7 Wind Mountains, he could only decide to temporarily postpone the trip. The reason was, the person who brought the news was a strong warrior of the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. By the time he was found by a team of herb gatherers, he was already close to death. He only managed to say cave, giant red snake, and earth dragon grass before he died. Thus, this led to the conclusion that there was earth dragon grass within the 7 Wind Mountains, yet there should be a giant red snake standing guard over it. It even managed to severely injure a strong warrior of the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. Yet Ling Han knew that where there was earth dragon grass, there would usually be a red-scaled dragon snake coiled nearby. The snake would absorb the weak dragon chi released by the earth dragon grass to slowly evolve and complete the transformation from a snake to a dragon. A mature red-scaled dragon snake would possess cultivation comparable to the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. Furthermore, because it possessed a bit of the dragon's bloodline, its power far exceeded an ordinary warrior of the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier. It could be considered to have 1 foot in the Gushing Spring tier and was an invincible king of the Element Gathering tier. Should Ling Han enter the 7 Wind Mountains at this stage, even if he managed to find that cave, there was no way he could be an equal opponent to the red-scaled dragon snake. It would be useless even with the help of Lu Yutong, unless Lu Yutong had 1 foot in the Gushing Spring tier as well. He would definitely go to the 7 Wind Mountains, but he had to make full preparation for the trip. Moreover, the inner core of the red-scaled dragon snake could be refined into a transcending origin pill. Taking this pill would allow a martial artist in the Element Gathering tier to directly advance 1 layer, with the limit being the peak of the 3rd layer of Element Gathering tier. Additionally, because the red-scaled dragon snake possessed a bit of the dragon's bloodline, its blood and flesh were extremely nutritious and would allow Ling Han to grasp the Dead Tree tier, the 1st tier of the Indestructible Heaven Scroll, at a faster rate. He decided to continue working hard at Cultivation and only set off towards 7 Wind Mountains once he had broken through to the Element Gathering tier. He'd also be able to make use of the inner core of the dragon snake to quickly raise his cultivation level to the 3rd layer of Element Gathering tier then, after which he would easily break through to the 4th layer. Additionally, he also had to raise his own power through actual battle experience and strengthen his foundation. While in his last life he had stood at the summit of martial arts, to be honest, he was not considered the one with the strongest battle power. There was a simple reason for that. His cultivation progress was faster than an average cultivator's because he had possessed a heaven-grade high-level spirit base, but if he battled with a warrior of the same cultivation level, he would still have to take into account his opponent's battle tactics and the level of control he had over his use of martial arts skills. In his last life, Ling Han was definitely extremely intelligent. For how else could he become the first alchemy emperor ever, a record that no one has ever managed to achieve and likely no one else will ever achieve? However, there were definitely limits to one's time and energy. He had spent most of his time on alchemy research and concocting alchemical pills. Whatever time he had left he spent on raising his cultivation level, so how much time did he have left to refine his martial arts skills? But this was no problem, for his cultivation progress was much too fast. With the additional support of alchemical pills, how could his opponents be able to compare with him? He only had to use the difference in cultivation levels to crush his opponents. He needed not use any kind of tactics. But once he reached the summit of martial arts, this weakness was revealed. In Ling Han's last life, there were in total 7 strong warriors of the heaven tier. Based purely on actual battle power, he was definitely at the bottom. The reason was the fact that he had depended on the use of alchemical pills to increase his cultivation level and didn't really have much of an actual battle experience. It could be said that his cultivation level of heaven tier had actually been quite hollow. Of course, if he had spent more than 100 years to continue training in martial arts skills, he would definitely be able to compensate for this inadequacy. After all, he was still too young. A 300-year-old of the heaven tier was still a very rare existence in history. Such people could be counted on the fingers of one hand. In this life, Ling Han no longer wanted to become this kind of paper tiger warrior, so he definitely needed to leave a deep footprint behind his every step. Each step had to be taken firmly. Ling Han had no excess thoughts. Aside from cultivating the 5 elements heaven grade skill every day, he also began to refine his martial arts skills. In his last life, he had given up on using yellow grade and black grade martial arts skills at a very early stage. He had mostly just stuck to using heaven grade martial arts skills, and only sometimes would he deign to use earth grade martial arts skills. But now, he could only use yellow grade martial arts skills. As a result, he needed to work very hard on cultivating and make himself become an indomitable ruler of all those with the same cultivation level, and not just obtain his victories by taking advantage of the difference in cultivation level between him and his opponents. However, he had in his hands a large variety of high-level martial arts skills, but very few low-level ones. That was natural. In his previous life, he had been a strong warrior of heaven tier. Even if he had discovered any black grade or yellow grade martial arts skills in a historical site, how would it be possible that he would train in any of them? He may flip through some of them, but there were definitely few of them. Thankfully, he had also been a martial artist that had slowly worked his way up from the bottom in his last life, so he still possessed a few low-level martial arts skills. Shocking electricity sword arts, flying fire palm arts, dashing panther fist, and exiting cloud step were all yellow-grade high-level martial arts skills. However, what caused Ling Han to feel a little embarrassed was the fact that he had not cultivated these 4 martial arts skills to the highest level in his last life, for he was always busy with concocting pills. So, he just had to start all over again. He was still young anyways. Ling Han began with shocking electricity sword arts. The reason was simple. His current cultivation level was still too low, so he needed the support of a weapon to increase his strength, and the favorite weapon of most martial artists were either a sword or a saber. Ling Han decided to head to Balance Mountain for training. Balance Mountain was about 80 kilometers north of Gray Cloud Town. It was not a very large mountain. Even the continuous length and breadth of it measured just over 100 kilometers. There were 4 towns within the mountain's vicinity, and their residents largely depended on the mountain for their livelihood. The reason being, this mountain had both medicinal herbs as well as demonic beasts, and to a martial artist, both of these things were beneficial. Unlike the gigantic mountain range that was the 7 Wind Mountains, where the demonic beasts were extremely powerful to the point that even strong warriors of the spiritual ocean tier dared not venture too deeply, the strongest demonic beast in Balance Mountain was only in the element gathering tier and could only be found in the innermost parts of the mountain range. Thus, as long as they did not venture too deeply into the mountain range, Balance Mountain was an excellent training grounds for a martial artist in the body refining tier. Ling Han knew very well that purely practicing would never let him train in a martial arts skill to the highest level. To achieve that, he had to experience actual battle. Although Ling Dongxing did not want his son to take risks, he also knew that it was impossible for a real martial artist to grow up protected like a plant in a greenhouse. Moreover, Liu Tong would be by Ling Han's side to protect him, so naturally he did not need to worry that they would encounter some danger. Therefore, he agreed. He was also very busy now. He was currently making preparations for the counterattack against the Chung clan, while also reorganizing the Ling clan to regain power over the clan, which Ling Zhongquan had partially taken over these past few years. Ling Han and Liu Yutong very quickly began their journey, setting off towards Balance Mountain. As Balance Mountain was quite close by, they did not need to bring too much baggage with them and had only brought 2-3 changes of clothing. Yet even so, they still carried a sizable bundle each. This caused Ling Han to miss the spatial ring from his previous life. A spatial ring seemed to be not much different from a normal ring, yet there was an incredible space within it that could accommodate a large number of items. If you were going on a trip, bringing a spatial ring along would be very convenient. However, the method to create spatial rings was long lost with the passage of time, so there was only an extremely limited number available. In his last life, only a strong warrior of at least flower blossom tier could possess one. Otherwise, even if you had very luckily obtained one, it would still bring a fatal disaster to you as its owner. A spatial ring was something extremely valuable. They traveled by foot. A distance of 80 kilometers was nothing much to a martial artist, and they only spent about 2 hours on their journey. The two of them set off in the morning, and they had already entered the vicinity of Balance Mountain by noon. They could hear the distant roars of tigers and cries of monkeys. As they looked everything over, a strongly fragrant, primitive, desolate air blew against their faces. "Let's go." Ling Han walked in front and said, "As long as it's a demonic beast in the body-refining tier, you don't have to do anything. Just leave it to me." "Very well," Lu Yutong nodded. However, Balance Mountain was not a place that was filled to the brim with demonic beasts. Although the two deliberately searched for them, they did not encounter even one. They didn't even encounter any ordinary wild beast. As the sky slowly darkened, the two of them began to feel hungry. They had only brought a small amount of food as emergency rations. They had actually intended to hunt the demonic beasts on the mountain for food. "We have to quickly hunt a demonic beast. Otherwise, we'll have to go hungry tonight," Ling Han said as he brandished the iron sword in his hand. He had bought the sword before he had departed for the journey. It was considerably expensive, being priced at 10 silver coins. It would be enough against a demonic beast of body-refining tier, but against a demonic beast of element-gathering tier, it wouldn't even be able to break through its defense. Moreover, he was not an equal opponent for a demonic beast in the element-gathering tier anyway. Lu Yutong suddenly stopped walking. "What is it? Have you heard something?" Ling Han said with a bit of excitement. "My shoelaces came undone." Lu Yutong crouched down. He never imagined that this woman had a bit of a sense of humor. Ling Han shrugged and waited until Lu Yutong stood up. The two of them then continued their way forward. However, they had not walked too far before Lu Yutong once again crouched down. "Your shoelaces came undone again?" Ling Han asked. "No, I heard something." Lu Yutong looked over in a particular direction. Her expression was still icy cold. This woman definitely had a cold sense of humor. Ling Han too glanced in the same direction. Lu Yutong was in the element-gathering tier, so her sight and hearing were much stronger than his. The shrubs in front of them were shaking, as if something was making its way out. Very quickly, a gigantic wolf's head emerged, rapidly followed by the appearance of its body. It was about the size of a water buffalo and was blood-red in color, though its skin had several rotting scars scattered all over its body. It looked a little disgusting. "Our luck's not bad. This is a rotten blood wolf." Ling Han's eyes lit up. Cultivating the indestructible Heaven Scroll required various valuable materials to support his training, and the fresh blood of demonic beasts was currently the best material available, while the rotten blood wolf could be considered as one of the strongest demonic beasts in the body-refining tier. "Be careful," Lu Yutong reminded. A mature rotten blood wolf was a being in the 9th layer of body-refining tier. Other than that, demonic beasts always had a big advantage over humanity when it came to strength and defense, and that was the case even when a demonic beast and a human cultivator had similar cultivation. The advantage of martial artists, on the other hand, was in the fact that they could use various martial arts skills and weapons to greatly increase their own power. However, Ling Han was only in the 7th layer of body-refining tier now. There was too big a gap between him and the rotten blood wolf. Moreover, a martial artist could die at any moment in a battle against a demonic beast. The battle would not end even if you shout "Stop" or "I give up." "Don't worry," Ling Han smiled, wielding the iron sword in his hand. His expression immediately became serious. The rotten blood wolf continuously released deep growls. In front of it stood two people. The man did not look very threatening to it, but the woman standing behind him caused the wolf to feel dread. However, due to the ferocious nature of a demonic beast, it was not willing to give up its prey. The blood and flesh of demonic beasts were considered extremely nutritious to any martial artist, but martial artists were likewise a very nutritious meal to demonic beasts. The rotten blood wolf was very cautious. It did not attack right away. Yutong, step back, Ling Han said. Wolves were an extremely patient, very careful species. It must have sensed Lu Yutong's hidden strength. Lu Yutong frowned faintly. Considering the current distance, she would be able to help him in time if he needed it. But if this distance increased, then should Ling Han encounter any danger, she might not be able to do anything to help him. Trust me, Ling Han smiled. Lu Yutong finally stepped back slowly. The rotten blood wolf's ferocious nature was immediately roused. The claws of its front paws dug into the ground and its jaws opened, revealing 2 rows of sharp dagger-like teeth, exuding a cold air. Ling Han crooked his finger and said, "You big stupid dog. Come, come, come. Ayo!" The rotten blood wolf released a howl, pouncing abruptly at a very surprising speed. Ling Han did not panic. With a wave of his long sword, the shocking electricity sword arts had already been initiated. Shwa! Only one sword stabbed forward, yet 2 flashes of cold light appeared. One of them was the sword itself, while the other was a white-colored energy. Sword Qi. Lu Yutong could not help breathing out in shock. Sword Qi was the symbol of a swordsman, just like a saber's wielder needed to have saber Qi. It was incomparably sharp and extremely powerful. She had not formed Sword Qi yet. She knew the difficulty of achieving it. She had an uncle who had been acclaimed as a genius in the art of the sword, yet he had only formed Sword Qi after 5 years of immersing himself in the path of the sword. Was this guy really human? Ling Han felt no surprise, however. Forming Sword Qi was only a natural course of event. His goal was Sword Ray. Sword Ray was the solid form of Sword Qi. His power was even stronger. Unfortunately, he had not spent much time on sword arts in his last life, so he had only formed Sword Qi and did not manage to form Sword Ray. The prerequisite for forming Sword Ray was that one thrust of the sword would have tens of flashes of Sword Qi, which then had to be condensed into Sword Ray. Just now, he had only managed to release 1 flash of Sword Qi. He still had a very long way to go. The next step from Sword Ray was Sword Heart. This was the highest level one could achieve on the path of the sword. However, against a rotten blood wolf, 1 flash of Sword Qi was more than enough. As the shocking electricity sword arts unfolded, Ling Han's long sword moved freely, his figure graceful. Accompanying the display of shocking electricity sword arts was the exiting cloud step. Every step was about 4 or 5 meters long, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, suddenly forwards, suddenly backwards. His steps appeared strange and were extremely quick, becoming a blur to any observer's eyes. Lu Yutong looked on from the side and could not help nodding her head in secret. If she suppressed her cultivation level to the 7th layer of body refining tier, she would definitely not be able to perform as well as Ling Han. Rather, she would probably be facing danger from all sides by now. After all, there was a big difference in cultivation level between Ling Han and his opponent 2 layers. Furthermore, the opponent was a demonic beast. Normally, in a battle between a martial artist and a demonic beast, the martial artist needed to have a slight advantage in cultivation level to attain victory. If the cultivation levels of the martial artist and the demonic beast were about the same, then the martial artist had a higher chance of losing. After all, not every martial artist was a battle genius. Ling Han's sword moves were becoming more and more fluid. His steps were natural and smooth as he enjoyed the pleasure of battling. He had really put too much focus into the path of alchemy in his last life. In terms of martial arts, he used to care about cultivation level only. His whole journey upwards had just been a superficial understanding of martial arts. But this time, as he once again stepped onto the path of martial arts, he suddenly discovered that martial arts could actually be very interesting too. The rotten blood wolf had become his sparring partner, allowing him to practice his moves to his heart's content, tempering his grasp of the shocking electricity sword arts. 10 minutes later, the rotten blood wolf was already covered with cuts and bruises. This caused it to become very fearful. This seemingly weak human was actually so powerful. It did not want to retreat, but it feared even more that not only would the 2 not become an offering to its fangs, but it itself would become a meal for these 2 humans. There's no escape. Ling Han laughed loudly. The sword moved as he willed it to. Two flashes of sword chi were simultaneously released in between the glints of cold light. Two flashes of sword chi. He had finally broke through. Pooh! Blood splattered as a crimson flower suddenly blossomed on the neck of the rotten blood wolf. Its large body toppled over with a loud noise, its eyes open wide as if it still could not believe that a human at the 7th layer of body refining tier would actually be able to kill it. Demonic beasts had a very high level of intelligence. Powerful demonic beasts could even possibly have intelligence comparable to a human's. Ling Han nodded. The power of two flashes of sword chi was indeed huge. Previously, one flash of sword chi only allowed him to fight on equal footing with the rotten blood wolf, but two flashes allowed him to kill it in an instant. As expected, even if the cultivation level was the same, there could still be a large discrepancy in actual strength of different martial artists. At the side, Lu Yutong was once again shocked into speechlessness. Just this little bit of time, and Ling Han had improved from one flash of sword chi to two. If that uncle of hers knew about this, wouldn't he be shamed to the point of jumping into a river and drown himself? As that uncle of hers had spent more than 30 years to form 4 flashes of sword chi, he was already acclaimed as a genius swordsman by the whole clan. But when compared to Ling Han, however, she did not know how far ahead Ling Han's starting line was, or how terrifying his comprehension ability was. Otherwise, how would he have been able to achieve heaven tier by 200 years old in his last life? Dinner's settled, Ling Han said with a smile. The two of them found a small brook. Settling by the brook, they cleaned the body of the rotten blood wolf. They naturally wouldn't waste the blood of a demonic beast and so poured all the blood into a pouch. Afterwards, Ling Han would bath himself in the blood to absorb the essence of it to temper his own body. They started a fire and cut off the wolf's leg for barbecue. After sprinkling some salt on it, a fragrant aroma very quickly wafted out. There shouldn't be too many demands when on a trip out in the wilderness. After they had washed the wolf's leg with clean water from the brook and it had dried, the sky had already completely darkened. They did not continue their journey onwards. Instead, they both sat cross-legged by the brook and began cultivating. Ling Han bathed himself in the blood of the demonic beast. He started to circulate indestructible heaven scroll to extract the concentrated essence of the blood for his own use. After merely slightly more than 10 minutes, this dense, sticky beast's blood became watery and diluted. The essence within it was already completely spent. Like I thought, improving one's physique is truly quite difficult. Ling Han thought. Let's use an example. If a martial artist in the element gathering tier was consciously defending using origin power covering his body while being freely attacked by a martial artist of body refining tier, it would be impossible for the latter to break through this layer of defense. However, if they didn't try to defend, the defense of a martial artist of element gathering tier was not much stronger than a martial artist of body refining tier. For instance, should a martial artist in element gathering tier be ambushed by a martial artist in body refining tier when asleep, then the chances were high that he would die due to his carelessness. Meanwhile, strengthening one's physique would ensure that this defense would be a passive and permanent one, active even when asleep or unconscious. However, the strengthening of the physique was an extremely difficult task that required the expense of a large amount of valuable natural treasures. Ling Han had been the previous type, and had not spent much effort on strengthening his physique in his last life. Of course, the reason why the beast's blood could be refined so quickly was because the indestructible heaven scroll was much too powerful and shockingly efficient. Otherwise, for other kinds of cultivation techniques like stone skin skill, it might require about 3 or 4 days' time to be completely refined. Ling Han could clearly feel that his muscles had become denser and his skin tougher. If a sharp piece of rock was drawn over his skin, the most it would do would be leaving behind a white mark. Very soon, he should be able to achieve the physique of dead tree tier. After the night had passed, the two of them continued their journey on the mountain, seeking demonic beasts to battle. From the second day onwards, it seemed as if their luck had taken a turn for the better as they continuously encountered demonic beasts. This did not just provide Ling Han with a very good chance for accumulating actual battle experience, but also provided him with a large supply of beast's blood, allowing him to continuously advance in his cultivation of indestructible heaven scroll. On the fourth day, they exited the forest and saw 5 people sitting in a clearing not too far ahead. The 5 of them looked as if they had gone through a huge battle, every one of them looking quite miserable. These 5 were all youngsters, all of them less than 20 years old. 3 of the group had achieved the 9th layer of body refining tier, while the other 2 were in the 8th layer. In a small place like Grey Cloud Town, based on their individual cultivation level, the 5 of them could definitely be praised as geniuses. Lu Yutong immediately took out a veil to conceal her face. She was born too beautiful, and her unworldly beauty easily caused problems, though she herself had no fear of such problems. "Brother, which town are you from?" one of the young men asked. His tone was filled with confidence, hinting that he should be from some large, wealthy clan. Ling Han smiled and said, "Grey Cloud Town. We're all from Guorak Town," that young man continued to say, and began to introduce his group. "I am Lu Dong, he's Chun Peng Ju, he's Li Hao, that guy's Zhou Chong, and this beauty here is Zhu Shui, the noble Miss Zhu." Ling Han nodded at the 5 of them and said, "I'm Ling Han, and this here is Lu Yutong. Ling Han, we discovered a green spiritual fruit just now, yet there is a very powerful demonic beast standing guard nearby, so we have no way of getting to it. How about it? Are you interested in working together with us?" Lu Dong suggested to Ling Han. The reason behind his friendly attitude was revealed by his words. "Oh!" Ling Han's heart stirred. A green spiritual fruit would not only improve the cultivation level of a martial artist, it was also very beneficial for a martial artist preparing to break through to the element gathering tier. The 5 people in front of him were very close to achieving the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. Should they consume a green spiritual fruit at this stage, it would be extremely helpful to their breakthrough. Spiritual fruits were different from alchemical pills. They were completely natural treasures, so consuming them had no side effects, unlike how it was the case with alchemical pills. If one were to continuously take alchemical pills, traces of poisonous impurities present in alchemical pills would accumulate within their body. However, there were some spiritual fruits that possessed effects so strong that they had to be refined into pills before they could be consumed. Otherwise, it would be the same as committing suicide. "What level is that demonic beast?" Ling Han asked. "Miasma Cloud Beast, 9th layer of body refining tier," Zhou Chong replied. Ling Han suddenly understood why even these 5 people were powerless. As the miasma cloud beast would continuously release large amounts of poisonous miasma during battle, fighters had to hold their breath. However, in a violent battle, even for a martial artist, how long would they be able to hold their breath for? Thus, without crushing power to end the battle in a very short period of time, there would be no way to defeat a miasma cloud beast. However, you must first receive a saber attack from me to prove that you possess sufficient strength. Li Hao spoke and brandished the saber in his hand, his face showing a very cool expression, fully intent on showing off. "You have to be careful, he's in the 9th layer of body refining tier. Furthermore, his nickname is Saber Maniac. He never jokes around when talking about sabers," Zhu Shui cautioned. "If your cultivation level is not above the 7th layer of body refining tier, then it's better if you don't take his attacks head-on." Ling Han nodded with a smile and said, "I only need to take one attack from you? Just one," Li Hao continued to say very coolly and arrogantly, looking like some kind of master swordsman. "Very well, come on then." Ling Han did not boast of his own abilities, nor did he display any disdain towards his opponent. He only nodded very calmly in response. Li Hao moved and arrived in front of Ling Han. His right hand was placed on the hilt of the saber at his waist, but he made no move to draw it out yet. His left foot was in front while his right foot remained at the back. His upper body leaned slightly forwards, his expression one of complete concentration. Ling Han was slightly surprised. This guy actually looked a little decent, and vaguely had the bearing of a swordsman. Li Hao drew his saber abruptly, and a flash of cold light blazed and slashed swiftly towards Ling Han. Ding! A sharp sound echoed and sparks flew. Ling Han managed to draw his sword in time, scraping it against the blade of the saber. However, the long sword did not go against the saber head-on. Instead, it drew all the way from the saber's tip right to the saber's hilt and in this way managed to dissipate the heavy weight of the saber. The sword's movement was extremely quick. Li Hao's saber attack was unexpectedly ended. Zhu Shui and the rest of her companions were all shocked. The power Ling Han displayed in this one strike was obviously only the 7th layer of body-refining tier, yet he managed to dissolve Li Hao's full power slash, exhibiting more than exceptional sword skills. "You pass?" Li Hao nodded, a very arrogant expression on his face. Yet Ling Han gave a flick of his long sword and said, "You too should take an attack from me." "Ha ha! Are you testing me?" Li Hao gave a big laugh. Although Ling Han managed to take a saber attack from him, this did not signify that he would be able to fight on even footing with him. These were completely two different issues. "Something like that," Ling Han said with a smile. "Do you dare? Then bring it on," Li Hao said confidently. When they exchanged blows previously, he had confirmed that Ling Han's cultivation level was only in the 7th layer of body refining tier. Although the two of them were both similarly in the late stage of body refining tier, the difference of 2 layers was still very distinct. The sword in Ling Han's hand moved in an elaborate manner and suddenly pierced forwards, aiming directly at Li Hao's neck. Li Hao naturally did not fear Ling Han's attack. He brandished his saber in a block. With a ding, the long sword stopped its approach right in front of his throat, missing by a hair's breadth. "You've lost." Ling Han withdrew his sword. "I clearly blocked your dash." Li Hao was just about to speak, when he saw that Ling Han gave a flick of his sword. An array of white-colored cold light flashed swiftly. "Sword Qi!" Lu Dong and his company simultaneously gasped in shock. Li Hao could not help the darkening of his expression. He naturally knew the power of Sword Qi, so he nodded and said, "I've lost." If Ling Han had released Sword Qi just now, then he currently would only be a dead body. Lu Dong and company were shocked half to death. The fact that Ling Han had managed to parry Li Hao's saber previously had already made them feel very impressed. But now this was actually a guy who had even formed Sword Qi. He really was inconceivable. Li Hao's fighting spirit rose again and said, "Let us spar once more." He had not yet experienced a battle with someone who could form Sword Qi. This was a rare opportunity. "Very well." Ling Han nodded in agreement. He had a slight intent to train Li Hao as he thought that this brat would be able to step onto the path of an actual swordsman. As he spoke, his right hand flicked, and his long sword once again flashed out. Li Hao naturally would give it his best, and hurriedly brandished his saber in a slash. He wanted to use the weight of the saber to force Ling Han to fly out of the spar. He opted to attack instead of pure defense. Ding, 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 ding. The two fighters battled fiercely. Li Hao was not instantly killed this round. However, he suffered quite a bit as Ling Han had started to use Sword Qi, which left many wounds on Li Hao's body. Tens of moves later, Li Hao decisively surrendered. If they continued to battle, he might really bleed to death. "Sword Qi is indeed powerful," he said, both frustrated and excited. Should he be able to form Saber Qi, then the situation might be completely different. "Do not be discouraged, you are already quite skilled," Ling Han said aptly. Although he had not spent much time on sword arts in his last life, how intelligent was he? Moreover, he had once achieved the summit of heaven tier. His one day's training would be comparable to a year's training of a person in body refining tier, or even a few years' training. Just how old was Li Hao that he could actually spar with him? Zhu Shui and company were both shocked and overjoyed. Their shock was due to the fact that Li Hao was the strongest amongst them yet was still unfit to be Ling Han's opponent. Their joy was because their chances of obtaining the green spiritual fruit had increased greatly now with the help of such a master swordsman. The group of 7 set off on their way to where the green spiritual fruit was located. "So it seems that Brother Ling is the heir to the Ling clan of Grey Cloud Town. That's strange, we should have long heard of a genius existence like Brother Ling." On the way to their destination, Ling Han had become the focus of the 5 young people's attention, and so naturally was barraged by their questions. This was normal. His predecessor had no idea that he had possessed an immortal grade spirit base. Neither did he know the 5 elements heaven grade skill. It'd be strange if he was well known. Ling Han only answered that he had been more subdued in the past, and thus deflected this question. Though Zhu Shuiyi and her companions also had much interest in Lu Yutong, she was icily silent all the while, and Ling Han too did not seem like he was going to introduce her. Thus they could only feel curious in their hearts. Close to an hour later, they finally arrived at an extremely moist place. In front of them, there suddenly appeared a cave. They hadn't even entered the cave yet, but could already smell a disgusting stink. However, they could vaguely see a plant that was about a meter tall. Its stem had no leaves, looking like a sugarcane. However, there hung several fruits from it, neither too many nor too few, exactly 7 of them. If we go any closer, we'd be affected by the miasma poison. We must hold our breaths if we want to advance forwards. That miasma cloud beast is very cunning. It would definitely not leave the sphere of influence of the miasma poison. We have to draw that miasma cloud beast out. As long as we can obstruct it for a few breaths' time, we'll be able to extract the spiritual fruits. Miss Lu and Shuiyi will be responsible for extracting the green spiritual fruits. Us 5 men will be in charge of obstructing the miasma cloud beast. Agreed. This was mostly directed at Ling Han. They would both have one person on the team obtain the fruits to avoid either party snatching the fruits and fleeing. Ling Han smiled and nodded. If they knew what Lu Yutong's cultivation level was, then they probably might not offer this kind of suggestion. We have to draw the miasma cloud beast out first. If we start the battle in the cave, then we would not be able to take advantage of our superior numbers, Zhou Chang said. The 5 men all drew out their respective weapons, banging them against each other to create a clamor. It took only a while before a creature which looked similar to a wild hog ran out of the cave. There were air sacs all over its body that kept on releasing a gray fog. 2 long, thick fangs protruded outside its lips, looking like 2 short spears, exuding a strong pressure. This was the miasma cloud beast. With its power, it could be considered to be in the upper echelons of the body-refining tier's demonic beasts. The miasma cloud beast appeared at the cave entrance, yet it did not attack. It only growled deeply and bared its teeth at the 5 humans in front of it. The air sacs all over its body continuously released a gray fog, forming a dark cloud above it. "Let's go!" Zhou Chang gave a loud shout and made the first move. Lu Dong, Chun Pengju and Li Hao followed closely behind. The 4 of them simultaneously brandished their respective weapons and flew towards the miasma cloud beast. However, Ling Han made no movement. Instead, he stayed behind, silently watching. For against 1, although Li Hao and his companions had the advantage in numbers, under the continuous influence of the poisonous miasma, they could not display their full prowess and very quickly were on the losing side. They could not help feeling very worried. Hadn't they made an agreement to join forces and attack together? Why was Ling Han just standing there by the side and watching? Shua! Right at that moment, Ling Han drew his sword quickly, as if he was moving at the speed of light. This sword move was really very cleverly timed, as the miasma cloud beast had just defended against the combined attacks of Lu Dong and his companions, and its defense had weakened, creating an opportunity for Ling Han. Shua! The long sword waved, seemingly like a deity descended from the heavens. With a pu sound, the sword pierced through the right eye of the miasma cloud beast and deeper into its body, driving in all the way until the hilt. Pong! The miasma cloud beast fell heavily onto the ground. It was actually killed in one blow. What? Mother! See! Lu Dong and the others, including Zhu Shuiyi who had been in hiding, inhaled sharply in shock. That was an actual miasma cloud beast, one of the strongest amongst demonic beasts in body-refining tier. And yet it was killed in one blow. How could they accept something this unbelievable? But immediately they took to their heels. If one spoke, they would naturally inhale air. They had all inhaled a bit of miasma poison just now. Thus they had to circulate their respective cultivation techniques as soon as possible to dissolve the poison. Otherwise, their internal organs could very likely corrode. After a while, Lu Dong was the first to walk towards Ling Han, and patting his shoulder, he said, "I thought you brat were already scared to the point that you couldn't move, but you're actually so strong. Your one strike could actually be so swift. Ha ha! Brother Ling is truly powerful to actually kill the miasma cloud beast in one blow, Li Hao said. To be able to witness such a clean, decisive slash. He too felt immeasurably excited since he was a swordsman himself. Ling Han only smiled. The lower the cultivation level, the easier it would be for one with a lower cultivation level to challenge someone with a higher cultivation level. Moreover, the miasma cloud beast had had most of its attention focused on Lu Dong and the rest just now, which gave him the chance to kill it in one strike. If it was a one-on-one battle, Ling Han would definitely not be able to fight the miasma cloud beast on even grounds, unless he had taken the antidote to the miasma poison beforehand. After the miasma poison had dissipated, they plucked the green spiritual fruits one by one, but did not damage the plant itself. The plan they came up with just now was because they were short on time, and so could only choose to uproot the plant. But now that the miasma cloud beast was dead, they naturally had no need to do such a thing. This, after all, was a natural spiritual medicine. Damaging it would equal damaging the harmony of nature. 7 green spiritual fruits. They each could obtain one. However, though Lu Yutong had put hers away, she would definitely hand it over to Ling Han later. Hang! Leave the spiritual fruits behind. They heard a cold voice speak. 2 men walked over to them, one in front while the other remaining behind. One was young while the other was old. The younger one seemed to be about 20+ years old, while the older man appeared to be about 70 or 80 years old, with a head full of white hair. The speaker was the young man. He was walking in front while the old man followed him from behind like a servant. Ling Han glanced at the approaching pair. With the insight of a warrior in Heaven tier, he could immediately tell that the young man was in the 9th layer of body refining tier, while the old man had already reached the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Who do you think you are to be so arrogant? Lu Dong immediately stood, yelling at the unknown young man. However, that young man's gaze swept over Zhu Shuiyi's dainty figure and beautiful face, revealing a covetous expression. Then, he disdainfully said, "You don't even know I, Hang Zhan? Then you should have heard of Stone Wolf Sect, right? I am the eldest grandson of the 7th elder of Stone Wolf Sect." Stone Wolf Sect. Hearing these 3 words, the expressions on the faces of Lu Dong and the others all changed into ones filled with dread. In Rain Country, one couldn't casually proclaim themselves a sect or a faction. Faction, sect, association, and society. From highest to lowest, these were the 4 different levels. Only a party that possessed a warrior of the spiritual ocean tier could claim to be a faction. One with a master in the gushing spring tier could be proclaimed a sect. A party that only had a warrior in element gathering tier could be claimed as association, while society would be those in the lowest category. The Stone Wolf Sect was the greatest party within 1,000 miles. According to rumors, the 9 great elders were all warriors in the gushing spring tier, while the sect master was an individual standing at the pinnacle of the 9th layer of gushing spring tier. If this Hang Zhan was telling the truth and his grandfather really was the 7th elder of the Stone Wolf Gate, then he indeed had a terrifying background. Ha 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 ha. Now do you know who I am? Leave the spiritual fruits and all of you break one of your arms, then you can get lost. However, these 2 girls must stay behind. Hang Zhan once again looked at Lu Yutong. Although he could not see her face, her graceful figure still caused his heart to throb. With his rich experience of encounters with women, this girl definitely had to be a beauty. Lu Dong and his fellows were extremely furious. They could leave behind the spiritual fruits, but to actually have each of them break one of their arms? Should a martial artist break his own arm, that would be the same as destroying his own future. Zhu Shuiyi shivered. She knew why he wanted her to stay behind, and this made her feel disgusted, furious and fearful, all at the same time. Do you still intend to resist me? Hang Zhan smiled coldly. Elder Yu. Make them feel despair. Yes, young master. The white-haired old man behind him replied respectfully before slowly walking over to them. He originally had a bent figure, being the embodiment of a senile old man. Yet now his back straightened a bit with each step and his aura kept increasing, quickly causing Lu Dong and the others to pale. 9th layer of element gathering tier. In truth, Lu Dong and the others could not tell what Elder Yu's cultivation level was. They only knew that he was much, much stronger than them by a large margin. But no matter what layer of element gathering tier he was at, to suppress a few youngsters in body refining tier would be as easy as flipping his hand over. They were finished. Lu Dong and the others looked ashen. Although they were extremely unwilling, they could not help but admit that their backgrounds could not compare with the newcomers. As for comparing their own strength with their opponents, they were also unable to do so. "You, take off your veil," Hang Zhan said, pointing at Lu Yutong. The more he stared at Lu Yutong's figure, the more the fire in his heart blazed and the more he wanted to see her true face. Should Lu Yutong's true appearance not reach his expectations, he would definitely kill her in one strike for making him expect this much for nothing. Consequences? Hang Zhan naturally never thought about such a thing. The Stone Wolf sect was the king in this area. As long as they did nothing treasonous towards Rain Country, then so what if he killed a few people? Lu Yutong naturally would not even bother to respond. "En? Did you not hear me?" Hang Zhan was a little upset. He was used to being arrogant and bossy. The thing that infuriated him the most was if someone dared to disobey his commands. Lu Yutong looked at Ling Han. After seeing the smile plastered all over Ling Han's face, she then slowly reached towards her veil and calmly took it off. In an instant, it was as if their whole surroundings lit up. How could there be such a beautiful girl in this world? What an outstanding beauty! How devastatingly beautiful! Though her demeanor was as cold as an iceberg, it caused one to have an even stronger desire to conquer her. To be able to have this beauty become a charming pet at his knee, what sense of accomplishment would that be? Lu Dong and the rest were amazed to the point of losing their breath first, but then immediately felt pity, for this kind of outstanding beauty was about to fall into the hands of Hang Zhan. Hang Zhan naturally was extremely surprised and joyous. He had never imagined that he would actually encounter such a beauty. His eyes were wide to the point that they seemed as if they were about to pop out. He laughed loudly and said, "Beauty, come here. Be careful, young master. She's in the element gathering tier." Elder Yu suddenly spoke up, his wrinkled face filled with utmost seriousness. He could not tell this woman's actual power. It was possible to see the cultivation level of someone with lower cultivation than oneself, but this required both parties to be at a close enough distance. Just like Elder Yu, he was far beneath Lu Yutong in power, so he could only identify that Lu Yutong's cultivation level had already reached the element gathering tier, but could not tell exactly what her cultivation level was. Lu Dong and his group, as well as Hang Zhan, all experienced a great shock, displaying expressions of complete disbelief. This woman could only be 18 or 19 years old at most, yet she had already reached element gathering tier? But how was it possible that a strong warrior of element gathering tier would actually spout nonsense? Hang Zhan was shocked for a moment, before quickly giving a humph in his heart. So what if she was at element gathering tier? At this age, she could only have just broken through. How would it be possible that she could oppose Elder Yu? "Elder Yu, take her down." The lust in Hang Zhan's heart was fully active. Being a cultivator in the body refining tier, to be able to hold down a master in the element gathering tier underneath his body and toy with her, his sense of fulfillment would be overwhelmingly strong, particularly when this girl was of such exquisite beauty. He was very close to being unable to hold himself back. Although Elder Yu had a cautious expression on his face, he too did not think of Lu Yutong as a powerful enemy. After all, the girl was much too young. According to his mindset, the girl may be in the first or second layer in element gathering tier, maybe the third layer at most. He was someone in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Although it was not possible for him to break through to the gushing spring tier in this lifetime, but on the plane of element gathering tier, he found few who could actually battle against him on even footing. "Young miss, surrender obediently to avoid suffering later," he spoke up. Killing intent flashed through Lu Yutong's eyes. She was the princess of the Lu clan. In front of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, what did a mere Stone Wolf sect count as? This Hang Zhan actually dared to bear evil intentions towards her. It seemed like he really was seeking death. But when her current position came to mind, she could not help turning to look at Ling Han, a questioning look on her face. Ling Han gave a shrug and said, This kind of bastard. If you want to kill him, then go ahead. Lu Yutong turned back around, and the powerful aura of the 9th layer of element gathering tier was released without any reservations. It rivaled Elder Yu's aura, and showed no signs of losing. What? Elder Yu quickly paled, breathing out in shock. 9th layer of element gathering tier. How is this possible? 9th layer of element gathering tier? Elder Yu was not the only one to be greatly shocked. Even Lu Dong and his group were flabbergasted, their facial muscles twitching in shock. Let alone reaching the 9th layer of element gathering tier. For someone below 20 years old to achieve element gathering tier was already shocking enough. Lu Dong and his friends had originally thought that even if there was a gap between themselves and Lu Yutong, this gap wouldn't be too far, because they too had already achieved the 8th and 9th layers of body refining tier respectively, and so were only one step away from breaking through to element gathering tier. But the 9th layer of element gathering tier, that was a kind of power they only dared to ponder about as something they would only be able to face at least 8, or maybe even 10 years later. Elder Yu immediately clasped his fists in a polite gesture, and said, "Please excuse my young master's previous impoliteness. Young miss, I hereby apologize on behalf of my young master." Although both of them were in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and he thought that he would not lose against this young woman, the problem was that his opponent had already reached the 9th layer of element gathering tier at such a young age, and this was not something that could be done with the support of any ordinary party. In other words, it was her background Elder Yu was scared of. Although Hang Zhan felt upset and was unwilling to give up, there was nothing he could do. Even if he was an extremely haughty, arrogant man, he wasn't an idiot. He knew that there were some people that he could trifle with, and there were some people that he definitely should not even think of messing with. Lu Yutong belonged to the category of those he definitely should not even think of messing with. Lu Yutong only gave a wave of her hands and said stiffly, "I won't kill you. Get out of my way." What a joke. How could anyone think of committing blasphemy against the princess of the Lu clan and live? "Miss, don't go too far," Elder Yu said in a deep voice. Naturally, he would not just stand aside and watch Hang Zhan die. Lu Yutong did not answer. She raised her hands in an offensive stance. Yellow-grade high-level martial arts skill, snapping of the plum hands. Seeing this, Elder Yu knew that this matter could not be peacefully settled, so raised his hands as well, forming claws. Yellow-grade medium-level martial arts skill, flying eagle claws. Lu Dong declared. He was best at claw skills, and so knew the characteristics of many different skills belonging to that class. With one glance, he managed to identify Elder Yu's claw skill. "Ling Han, will that one from your family have any problems?" The 5 of them had already gathered around Ling Han. Lu Yutong was now their only ray of hope. Ling Han smiled softly and said, "She should not." Should not? Lu Dong and his companions were all unsettled. Should not sounded very dubious, but both of the fighters were in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, so really, who could actually say with certainty which one of them would emerge victorious? While they had been conversing, Lu Yutong had already moved, and was now in a fierce battle with Elder Yu. The 2 of them exchanged blows, their figures moving like wind extremely quick. The 2 fighters were both masters in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Lu Dong and his group couldn't clearly see their movements or judge the actual situation. They only felt the blurring of their sight and had completely no idea who was winning. Hang Zhan naturally couldn't see clearly either. He couldn't help feeling extremely anxious, for if Elder Yu was defeated, he would definitely lose his life as well. So, of course, he was worried. But after the battle had lasted for about 3 to 5 minutes, the movements of the 2 fighters had slowed down, not only to the point that Lu Dong and his group could all see very clearly, but also to the point that even they thought that the pace of the battle had become much too slow. However, a hint of prudence appeared on Ling Han's face. Slow did not mean that the 2 fighters were going easy on their attacks. On the contrary, the situation now was even more dangerous, for they had already entered a life-or-death stage. Should either of the 2 of them make even a small, tiny mistake, the result would not just be defeat but death. He recalled that these few days, whenever he was free, he would be guiding Lu Yutong. Based on his previous cultivation of Heaven tier, Whatever little bit of experience he managed to pass on to a lower-level martial artist would be extremely precious. As long as she had truly absorbed his teachings, there would definitely be a monumental increase in her power. With Lu Yutong's level of comprehension, he believed that she should have understood much of what he had been teaching her. This battle, she should be able to win. Lu Yutong and Elder Yu's battle slowed down even further. One of them was an old master in the element-gathering tier who had been at this stage for a very long time, and thus had extremely vast battle experience. Meanwhile, though the other was young, she was a martial arts genius and had a very high level of comprehension. Moreover, she had also benefited much from Ling Han's guidance, and was shockingly powerful in battle. Elder Yu's forehead was already heavily beaded with cold sweat. His opponent was too strong. He felt the oncoming pressure of death, but he dared not be distracted at this moment, not even to surrender and beg for mercy. If he dared pause, he would definitely suffer Lu Yutong's wrathful strike. Lu Yutong, on the other hand, was becoming more and more serene. She was already completely on the winning side. The situation was now extremely clear. Even Lu Dong and his group could see clearly that Lu Yutong was winning, so they smiled, for they saw their worries dissipate. Since they could see clearly, Hang Zhan naturally could see clearly too. He could not help stepping back and retreating, preparing to escape at the first opportunity. "You're in such a rush. Where are you headed to?" Ling Han flew forwards like an arrow shot from a bow, blocking his way. "Get out of my way!" Hang Zhan shouted loudly. "I'm from the Stone Wolf sect, and you dare to trifle with me? I'll slaughter your whole family." How overbearing. Ling Han drew his sword, his gaze filled with murderous intent. There was nothing worth saying to such a man. The best thing would be to immediately kill him. "Ling Han, don't be impulsive." Lu Dong could not help shouting out. Should Hang Zhan be killed, none of their clans would be able to withstand the furious rage of the Stone Wolf sect. "Ha ha! Listen to your companion's advice, and never oppose me. Otherwise, nothing but death awaits you." Hang Zhan laughed coldly. "You're fortunate today." He was just about ready to run away and escape. However, he had not yet managed to move from his place when he felt a cool sensation on his neck. A long sword was already pressed against it, immediately causing his whole body to shiver. He felt as if he was almost going to urinate out of fear. "There is no one that I dare not kill," Ling Han said calmly, and his voice turned cold. "Kneel." Hang Zhan did not dare refuse. The freezing cold eyes of the man in front of him caused him to feel a cutting chill. This was clearly a man of his word. "Apologize," Ling Han continued to say. Hang Zhan immediately felt the urge to stand up and spit out curses, but as he felt the freezing sensation upon his neck, he could only bow his head while thinking that as soon as he got back to the Stone Wolf sect, he would definitely have his grandfather personally come to kill all these guys in front of him. Of course, the two beautiful girls would be spared and become his toys instead. "I was wrong. I'm inhumane," he said, begging for mercy. "I hope you will become a good person in your next life," Ling Han said coolly. No dash Hang Zhan immediately sensed the situation was taking a turn for the worse, but he only felt a sharp pain on his neck as his sight suddenly turned dark. Fresh blood spurted out, causing his eyes to go wide in disbelief. Ling Han actually dared to kill him. At the same moment, Lu Yutong gave a soft cry with a pat of her small hands. It was as if Elder Yu had turned into stone, showing no signs of movement at all. After a long while, his body finally collapsed onto the ground. "This is going to be a huge catastrophe," Lu Dong and the rest sighed in unison. Ling Han withdrew his sword and said, smiling, "Will you tell anyone of what has happened here today?" "Of course not." Lu Dong and the rest quickly shook their heads. "It's all right then. None of us present here will say anything. So who would find out that Hang Zhan and his lackey died here?" Ling Han said. However, Lu Dong and his companions were still unable to let go of their worries. After all, the name of Stone Wolf Sect was much too intimidating. Based on its power, the sect could easily eliminate their respective clans 100 times. With such feelings, they dared not linger here for too long, fearing that Ling Han would kill them too to ensure their silence. Moreover, They each possessed a green spiritual fruit in their hands, adding on to the unsettled feelings in their hearts. They soon bid farewell to Ling Han and set off, quickly disappearing from his sight. Killing the eyewitnesses, Ling Han naturally had no such plan, for his little female attendant was the princess of the Lu clan of the imperial city. Against such a noble existence, what did an insignificant Hang Zhan count as? If the Stone Wolf sect found out that Hang Zhan actually dared to bear evil intentions towards Lu Yutong, they might even personally behead Hang Zhan as an apology. Just as how Lu Dong and his group felt immeasurable fear towards Stone Wolf sect, what did an insignificant Stone Wolf sect count as in the eyes of the 8 great clans? I'll take one green spiritual fruit first. Once I reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier, I'll take the second one, Ling Han thought. Although he had already walked through all the 9 tiers on his way from the body refining tier all the way to the heaven tier, this did not imply that he could easily step over the gulf between the 2 tiers. That was because, aside from the comprehension and understanding accumulated within a given tier, breaking through the bottlenecks between tiers was an endeavor that required a vast amount of energy to support it. Where did this energy came from? Spiritual medicine, alchemical pills, treasures obtained from demonic beasts, spiritual fluids found in nature could all be used as the source of this energy. Unfortunately, these materials were extremely rare and hard to find. This was the reason why the higher the tier, the fewer martial artists there were that could achieve it. Without these kinds of supporting materials to provide the additional energy for martial artists to break through to a higher tier, the only thing they could do was depend on themselves to slowly accumulate the energy required for the breakthrough. Some would be able to succeed in breaking through, while some may cause themselves to explode from overaccumulation of energy. If he had not had the green spiritual fruit, Ling Han may have needed to accumulate about 10+ days worth of origin power to reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier, and then break through to the element gathering tier in a spurt of energy. But things were different now. When he reached the barrier between body refining and element gathering tier, Ling Han only needed to take the green spiritual fruit, and it would be smooth sailing all the way. Ling Han liberated all the valuables from the bodies of Hang Zhan and Elder Yu. Because the 2 of them had been on a journey, they obviously had not kept too many valuables on them. So all he managed to find were some money and a book on some secret martial art. The sum of money came up to a total of about 100,000 coins, which could not be considered a small sum. Meanwhile, the book was titled Detonation Arts, and it was a rather unique skill. Basically, it allowed a martial artist to inject his origin power into something which would cause the item to detonate. It would be difficult for someone to defend against such a skill. Elder, you should have just obtained this secret arts manual and had yet to start mastering it. Otherwise, if Lu Yutong had been surprised with such an attack in the midst of battle, then she would definitely have suffered quite a bit. The 2 of them moved to a new location. After all, there were 2 dead bodies in their previous location. Just looking at the 2 corpses would spoil their mood. Ling Han sat down in a cross-legged position. He then took out a green spiritual fruit and washed it with a bit of clean water. Then, he quickly consumed it in large bites. It really did deserve the name of a spiritual fruit born from nature. Even though its level couldn't really be considered high, it was still extremely delicious and, within a few bites, Ling Han had already finished eating it. He felt extremely dissatisfied and really wanted to take out the other fruit and eat it too. He quickly suppressed this impulsive urge and quietly waited for the medicinal effects to play out. In but a short moment, a powerful and intense medicinal effect was released, transforming into innumerable tiny particles, entering his bloodstream and spreading throughout his entire body. Ling Han circulated 5 elements heaven-grade skill. The spirit base in his dantian gave out a shimmering light like a lotus flower of the Tao, guiding the medicinal effects to nourish every piece of flesh, every bone, and every vein in his body. His cultivation rate was already very fast to begin with. Before he had consumed the green spiritual fruit, he had already reached the middle period of the 7th layer. Now that he had obtained the support of the spiritual fruit, his progression rate was naturally even more terrifying. The late period of the 7th layer of the body refining tier, the peak of the 7th layer of body refining tier, he accumulated some origin power and, in one breath, broke through to the 8th layer of body refining tier. At this time, the medicinal effects of the green spiritual fruit had not been completely exhausted yet, and were still continuously improving his cultivation. They were finally exhausted once Ling Han made it to the middle period of the 8th layer of body refining tier. Very good. It saved me about 6 days worth of time. Watching all this, a strange thought rose up in Lu Yutong's heart. It was the first time that she had not been shocked by the quick ascent of Ling Han's cultivation level. After all, this time should be considered normal, as he had eaten a green spiritual fruit. The two of them continued journeying around the mountain. Ling Han continued to refine his sword skills, hoping to achieve 3 flashes of sword chi before he broke through to the element gathering tier. After another 8 days, Ling Han had reached the peak of the 8th layer of body refining tier. After storing up 1 night's worth of origin power, he began the process of breaking through to the 9th layer of body refining tier. By the time morning came and the sun had risen, he stood up, the corners of his lips lifting slightly upwards in a smile. The 9th layer of body refining tier. Very good, I need around another 10 days' time and I will reach the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. At that time, I will consume the 2nd green spiritual fruit, and in one breath break through to the element gathering tier. Lu Yutong was naturally already numbed. Should Ling Han be able to break through to the element gathering tier on the morrow, she might very well not feel surprised. Otherwise, if she still became shocked every time this guy did something surprising, she really might die an early death. 10 days passed very quickly and Ling Han, as per his expectations, had already reached the peak of the 9th layer of body refining tier. He took out the 2nd green spiritual fruit and smiled, saying, "Today is my last day in body refining tier. AI. It really has been a very long time." Lu Yutong could not help rolling her eyes in response. She had been by Ling Han's side since the time when he was only in the 2nd layer of body refining tier. How many days had it been? Just 1 month. This was a very long time he was talking of. But when she recalled how Ling Han had been stagnant for a number of years in the 2nd layer of body refining tier previously, his rueful feeling could be considered quite logical. She started cultivation when she was 13, and achieved the element gathering tier when she was 14. This point alone did make it seem that her cultivation progress had been much faster when compared with Ling Han's. After Ling Han swallowed the green spiritual fruit, he started to break through to the element gathering tier. He did not rush it. Instead, he only started to gather the medicinal effects within his body. Usually, when a martial artist began the process of breaking through, even if they had the support of medicinal effects, they had to batter against the barrier repeatedly until it had somewhat loosened to be able to breach it. However, Ling Han had absolute confidence that as long as he had stored up enough energy, he'd be able to successfully break through this barrier on his first attempt. Half an hour later, his body was brimming with origin power, and he felt as if his whole body was inflated. This was, of course, but a misconception. It was just that he had stored too much energy within his body, causing him to have this kind of an inflated feeling. But should he still not break through or unleash this energy somehow, his body really might explode because of this accumulation of energy. It was like a water pouch that had already been filled to the brim. If the pouch was not punctured to make a hole to release some water, or if the water wasn't transferred to a bigger pouch, then the only result would be that the pouch would explode. It's about enough, Ling Han thought. Now all that's left is to guide this boundless energy towards the dantian and batter against the barrier. Body refining tier meant to store origin power in every bit of blood and flesh, and so it was actually very limited in quantity. As for element gathering tier, it meant to open up one's dantian and form a strange space within one's body. Everyone possessed this kind of a small universe, or a small world, in their bodies. In terms of martial arts, this kind of small world was thought to exist within one's dantian. Hong! Under the fierce barrage of energy, a slit-like hole appeared in his dantian. For anyone else to break through, they would have to depend on a continuous, repeated barrage to endlessly widen and enlarge this hole or slit. However, Ling Han was different. The energy he had accumulated was more than enough for him to immediately begin breaking through. Opening up the dantian was only the first step. The next step was the most important one. That was to solidify the origin power into a high-speed revolving nucleus. This was something like installing a motor in one's dantian. With a mental command, the origin nucleus revolving at high speeds would generate energy that would erupt with a horrifying attack. How was it that the element-gathering tier could easily crush the body-refining tier? That was because once the origin nucleus was formed, energy would gush out like a flood from it. Even if two fighters had accumulated equal amounts of origin power, the one who had actually formed the origin nucleus would have faster, stronger attacks, possessing an overwhelming advantage over his opponent. Ling Han's opening up his dantian could only be considered as being halfway to element-gathering tier. He had only raised the upper limit of his internal storage of origin power. The power upgrade depended on whether he could form the origin nucleus or not. The number of those in the 9th layer of body-refining tier who had been stuck on this step is unknown, but definitely very big. Martial artists of the element-gathering tier could form a total of 9 origin nuclei. Once they had succeeded in forming the 9th, they'd be able to start the process of breaking through to the gushing spring tier. However, for Ling Han, forming an origin nucleus was only a small issue. After all, he had already done it 9 times in his last life. He started to form the nucleus. The powerful origin power stirred, gathered, intertwined and melded together. He was very familiar with this process, and very quickly, the origin power within his body solidified into a nucleus form, as tiny as a hair's breadth. But he immediately experienced a great shock, for within his dantian, there actually appeared 5 origin nuclei. How was this possible? He had only just broken through to element-gathering tier, and now he had already reached the 5th layer of element-gathering tier? No. This was an impossible thing because these 5 origin nuclei were much too small, and were still very far from reaching their pinnacle. He had never heard that anyone had ever managed to form 5 origin nuclei in one go and simultaneously expand them to their pinnacle form. Additionally, the gaps between these 5 origin nuclei was much too small. They had a mutual attraction and repulsion relationship, forming a subtle balance. They were also differently colored gold, green, white, red and black, respectively. Ling Han's heart skipped a beat. These were the solid forms of the 5 different elemental alignments. These 5 nuclei represented gold, wood, water, fire, and earth, respectively. Could it be that a spirit base with multiple elemental alignments could form multiple origin nuclei? But how was it possible that he had never heard of such a thing in his last life? That's not right. Ling Han carefully examined them and concluded that these 5 different origin nuclei had achieved a perfect balance. Should any of these 5 nuclei be even a little bit stronger, it would destroy that delicate balance. Thus, there would only be one origin nucleus, the strongest that could survive in the end, while the other origin nuclei would be pushed aside and shatter. Following this line of deduction, for someone to be able to form 2, 3, 4, or the maximum of 5 origin nuclei, the elemental alignments of their spirit base had to achieve a perfect balance. This would allow the origin nuclei that had been formed to also be perfectly balanced with one another, none of which would be able to swallow the others and vice versa. There were many in this world who possessed 2 elemental alignments, or even 3 or 4. But those who had multiple elemental alignments and actually managed to achieve a perfectly balanced relationship between the multiple elemental alignments in his spirit base were few and far between. Thus, it was a pitiful few that could actually possess 2 or 3 origin nuclei. In his last life, besides burying himself in alchemy, Ling Han had also buried himself in cultivation. He took part in very few actual battles, and so not coming into contact with martial artists that had multiple origin nuclei was nothing strange. Moreover, multiple origin nuclei could become anyone's hidden trump card to turn over the tables and obtain victory, and who would reveal their trump card easily? The 5 origin nuclei would combine together to form a large origin nucleus, which means that I will have origin power 5 times stronger than anyone else. Ling Han thought. This was something very terrifying. For a martial artist to completely exhaust the origin power within his body, they'd need at least 100+ moves, or even 1,000+ moves. But should he be able to discharge this energy at 5 times the speed? This would mean that the power of every attack would be increased by 5 times. If the power of element gathering tier was shown with numbers, the first layer would be 1, then the second layer would be 2, and the third layer would be 3, but the fourth layer would be 6. There would be a leap after every 3 layers, separating the entire tier into the 3 major stages: early, middle, and late, respectively. With this kind of representation, the advantage of 5 elements origin nuclei was obviously without compare. No, the 5-element origin nuclei have also achieved a perfect balance as they are mutually interdependent. Thus the power they can generate would definitely not be just 5, but 6 times or even 10 times stronger. Should I reach the peak of the first layer of element gathering tier, I'd at least be able to fight on equal footing with someone in the 4th layer of element gathering tier. How much power would I actually have? I'll have to reach the peak of the first layer of element gathering tier to find out. So this was the true power of an immortal grade spirit base. However, to simultaneously expand and strengthen 5 origin nuclei would definitely be much slower than expanding just 1. So the advantage of cultivation speed of an immortal grade spirit base was thus evened out. Moreover, to be able to discharge origin power at 5 times the speed would require for the space within his dantian to be simply colossal. Otherwise, he would only have the opportunity to make a few moves before exhausting all of the energy stored in his body. So how could he continue to play like this? Never mind if there's no advantage of fast cultivation speed. After all, I would obtain power that would make me practically invincible amongst all those within the same cultivation level in exchange for it. Moreover, I am the Alchemy Emperor, so I'll still be able to maintain a high speed of cultivation and progress through the tiers. Even if I can only reach Heaven tier by 200 years old again, that'd still be the fastest record in history. No, I already have a complete understanding and comprehension of the different tiers, so I definitely would not need as long as 200 years to break through to Heaven tier. The world is fair. To be able to obtain stronger power, one must make twice, or even 10 times the sacrifice. Moreover, the space within my dantian is still too small, so I still do not have the ability to battle for too long. According to my understanding, only those spirit bases that have multiple elemental alignments that are also perfectly balanced can be labeled as an immortal grade spirit base. However, immortal grade spirit bases can also be separated into various categories, and my 5 elements mixed chaos lotus is the strongest. That's because there cannot be a spirit base with 6 elemental alignments in this world, as it would then be impossible to achieve a balance between the various elemental alignments. No wonder I had a strange feeling when I previously read the 2nd layer of this 5 elements heaven grade skill. I had initially thought that the creator of the skill arts had made some kind of a mistake, but now it seems that this is because the 5 elements mixed chaos lotus is able to form 5 elements origin nuclei. If it's the simultaneous circulation of the 5 origin nuclei, there are no problems with this skill arts. So, it seems that an immortal grade spirit base definitely needs a specific kind of skill arts to be able to release its full prowess. Otherwise, if I were to use an ordinary skill arts to stimulate the 5 elements origin nuclei, I really have no idea what would happen. It seems that in this life all my conditions are the best. If I still can't shatter the void and become a god with all those advantages, then I really should find a piece of tofu and knock myself to death with it. Taking advantage of the fact that the medicinal effects have not been completely exhausted, I'll cultivate for a while longer. Ling Han guided the remnants of the medicinal effects from the green spiritual fruit to expand his dantian and strengthen his origin nuclei. The cultivation process of element gathering tier was to expand one's dantian and strengthen the origin nucleus as much as possible. The larger the dantian, the more origin power it could store and accumulate. Meanwhile, the larger the origin nucleus and the faster its rotation, the stronger the power that could instantly erupt from it would be. Thus, even if 2 martial artists possessed the same cultivation levels, there would still appear a large gap between their individual battle prowess. Of course, the number of origin nuclei also had to be taken into consideration now. Ling Han was like an excavator, enlarging his dantian to enable it to store even more origin power and stimulating the rotation of his origin nuclei at the same time. With every rotation, the speed would increase by just a little bit more, and as strands of origin power twined around the origin nuclei would also become larger in size. He had to be very cautious when strengthening the origin nuclei in his dantian, because there needed to be an absolute balance amongst the 5 origin nuclei. Otherwise, if there was even the slightest bit of difference, this balance would collapse. The earlier the stage, the more there could not be any minuscule bit of difference, for the foundation was still much too weak. Because of his thirst for power, Ling Han diligently continued to cultivate with utmost concentration. What? While he had been energetically excavating, he suddenly stopped, and an inconceivable expression appeared on his face. A black tower was drifting within his dantian, exuding a golden light that stirred slightly. It gave off a desolate, primitive air, ancient and dignified. There were 9 levels in this tower, and from the angle of Ling Han's mind sight, this black tower had a height of 10,000 meters, connecting the heavens and the earth. Even though it had already been 10,000 years, Ling Han could still identify this black tower with one glance. In his words, even if this tower had been burnt to ashes, he'd still be able to identify it, because this black tower was the culprit that had killed him in his last life. Curses, how could this tower be inside his dantian? Could it be that killing him once in his last life was not enough, so it had chased after him to this second life, planning to kill him a second time? You can't play the game like that. In his last life, after overcoming many dangerous obstacles, Ling Han finally entered the Black Light Ground Valley, whereupon he discovered a mysterious black tower. There was a golden script engraved on the walls of the tower, which was the indestructible Heaven Scroll. That had been Ling Han's biggest opportunity, yet it was also the largest crisis in his last life. With a shake of the black tower, his physical body was directly shattered into ashes for some reason. His soul had survived and passed through 10,000 years into the current time period. Now looking upon this black tower, even with his strong mentality of a warrior of heaven tier, he still could not help but feel scared for a moment. In his last life, this black tower had only shook a little, and he was shattered into ashes. Now that it had reappeared within his body, how could this not be terrifying? However, Ling Han very quickly regained his composure. If the black tower intended to kill him a second time, then it could have done so long ago. Although he had only just discovered the existence of the black tower within his dantian, this thing should have actually been there for a very long time. And now that he thought about it carefully, this might clear away some of the confusion that he had. For example, why was it that his soul had existed for about 10,000 years? It must have been because of the black tower. The reason for his sudden rebirth must also be related to the black tower using some kind of unknown method to allow him to be reborn. The black tower also conveniently followed him into this new life. Brother, should I thank you or hate you? Ha! Ling Han murmured. Because of the black tower, his last life was ended prematurely, but to be honest, even if he had not been shattered to death by the black tower with a short 1,000 years' time, how would he be able to learn the indestructible Heaven Scroll? It was completely impossible, because even when he had neither eaten nor slept, spending all his time on his studies of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he still needed to spend 10,000 years' time. If it was under normal conditions, how would he be able to accomplish that? Now, he even had a feeling that the Black Tower had actually shattered him into ashes to help him and allow him to comprehend the indestructible Heaven Scroll in soul form. Thus he was reborn the moment he had finally grasped the Heaven Scroll's first layer. Otherwise, how could there be such a huge coincidence in this world? The Black Tower, as it had been in the past, still possessed 9 floors, and aside from the lowest floor having a tightly closed door, the other floors were all completely sealed, without a single window or any other entrance. Even with Ling Han's sight, he still could not identify the material used to construct this Black Tower. All he could sense from it was an icy, weathered ancient air. Additionally, Ling Han had never heard that the Dantian could accommodate anything else other than origin power. This Black Tower was definitely not of this world. There was a 99% chance that the Black Tower originated from the divine plane, and so did the indestructible Heaven Scroll engraved on its walls. A cultivation technique that required 10,000 years to be comprehended naturally could not possibly belong to this mortal plane either. Ling Han wanted to use his consciousness to enter the Black Tower, but discovered it was impossible. Even if consciousness was a power without form, and thus should be able to find its way anywhere, there was not even a small pinhole in this Black Tower through which his mental consciousness could enter. He wanted to force his way through the door, but when he directed his mental consciousness to rush towards the door, it was immediately rebounded back. Fine, this was a master. In his last life, it erased his existence with a casual tremor, and now its overbearing presence was occupying his dantian while he not only couldn't do anything to it, but also had completely no idea what kind of existence this Black Tower actually was. He was unwilling to give up, and once again commanded his consciousness to attack the Black Tower. No matter what, he had to find something out. After a few times of barraging his mental powers over and over against the tower, it seemed like the Black Tower had somewhat lost patience with him. It actually gave a slight tremor. There was finally a reaction, and a flash of consciousness was transmitted out by the Black Tower. This exceeded the level of simple language, and allowed Ling Han to directly understand its meaning. The general idea transmitted by the Black Tower was, the current you is still too weak, and cannot possibly enter the Black Tower. You'd have to at least break through to the Gushing Spring tier. But as the new master of the Black Tower, every time you progress to the next tier, you'll be able to obtain a single blessing from the Black Tower to directly raise your power by 1 tier. For example, as per Ling Han's current cultivation level of the early period of the first layer of Element Gathering tier, with the blessing of the Black Tower, he'd be able to display the power of someone in the first layer of Gushing Spring tier. However, it was only a one-time blessing. Even if he didn't use it, it'd be wasted and couldn't be accumulated. Master? He had actually become the master of the Black Tower. However, this Black Tower really was a master. After all, if he was its master, why was it that he could not make use of it at all? Moreover, for every tier he ascended to, he could only get a one-time blessing from the Black Tower. Looks like he'd have to break through to the Gushing Spring tier to be able to find out more. Still, this could become his trump card to instantly raise his power by 1 tier. This trump card was more than enough to let him turn the tables in a moment of danger. But he could only use this kind of trump card once every time he ascended to the next tier. The tower was really much too stingy. Ling Han could not help exhaling a sigh before opening his eyes, looking very sullen. Lu Yutong almost felt like crying at this. You managed to break through to the Element Gathering tier in 1 day, and yet you still look so disappointed. How could this be endured by others? Come on, let's go home. Ling Han gave a snap of his fingers. This was the first time he had experienced the warmth of a father's love, and now that he has been away from home for close to a month, he felt a bit homesick. The two of them then began their journey home. On the way, Ling Han went through the second layer of cultivation techniques of the 5 elements heaven grade skill inside his head. With his high perception, naturally he experienced no trouble and fully grasped every little detail of the second layer. There were 9 layers in total in the 5 elements heaven grade skill, corresponding with a martial artist's cultivation level from body refining tier all the way to heaven tier. Every breakthrough would mean that there should be a change to the corresponding cultivation technique suited to that cultivation level. Element gathering tier was indeed something else. Origin power gushed out from his dantian. The amount was at least 10 times that of the 9th layer of body refining tier. Origin power continuously flooded out from his dantian, as if there was no end to it. When they had departed, they had spent about less than half a day's time to arrive at their destination, but their return journey only lasted about an hour. Very soon, Gray Cloud Town appeared in front of their eyes. Greetings, young Master Han. Greetings, young Master Han. From the moment they stepped into the Ling clan residence, all servants and guards greeted Ling Han respectfully. Everyone now knew that Ling Han had defeated the Chung brothers, and thus naturally would not dare to be disrespectful to this young master previously well known as trash anymore. After asking around, Ling Han found out that his father was currently inside his study, and quickly ran there. Ling Dongxing had said before that as long as he managed to break through to the element gathering tier, he would tell him what had happened to his mother. He entered the yard, and soon arrived at the door to the study. The door was ajar, and he gave a soft cough before entering, and said, "Father, I've returned." "Haha, you returned just in time. Tonight, the Chung clan is hosting a banquet, and your name is also on the invitation." Ling Dongxing gave a hearty laugh, raising his head to look at Ling Han while holding out an invitation. Ling Han took the invitation, scanned through it, then said with a smile, "The Chung clan can't hold on any longer?" Ling Dongxing had long started his counterattack against the Chung clan. When Ma Dejun cut off the supply of alchemical medicine to the Chung clan, The Chung clan was like a normal human being who had lost a leg there. Every step was a trial. Additionally, the Ling clan was also attacking the other business ventures of the Chung clan, paying a high price to purchase the medicinal ingredients that were supposed to be sold to the Chang clan and selling them at low prices. In this manner, the finances of the Chung clan were completely paralyzed, just as how the finances of the Ling clan had been. 20+ days of this, and the Chung clan was now trapped in a big dilemma. At this time, the Chung clan actually sent them an invitation to a banquet they were hosting. This was most likely a plea for mercy. Later, the two of us will attend the banquet. But be careful and don't run around at the banquet. I'm worried that the Chung clan may be desperate enough to set up a trap, Ling Dongxing said. He would, of course, not brave the danger alone. The elite members of the clan would also be attending along him to act as a deterrence in case the Chung clan was thinking of committing violence. Ling Dongxing looked at Ling Han, slightly frowning. He felt as if something was not right, but exactly what that something was, he could not think of. Pa! After half a moment, he suddenly smacked the table and jumped up from his seat, his whole face filled with excitement, and said, Honor, you've broken through to element gathering tier. He finally discovered what that weird feeling he had was. Ling Han nodded and said with a smile, I have. Good, good, good. Ling Dongxing looked very excited, his hands clenched into fists. Because he had exerted too much strength into it, the bones in his fingers made a grinding sound, and the veins on his hands were protruding. Father, I want to know about Mother, Ling Han said deeply. Ling Dongxing was hesitant for a while, before nodding his head and saying, The current you does have the right to know. I had originally thought that the matter about your mother would be hidden in my heart for the rest of my life. I've hidden it for too long. So long that my heart is also very bitter. Ling Han nodded lightly. All these years, Ling Dongxing had borne the pain of losing his beloved wife alone. There was no one to comfort him, nor was there anyone to shoulder this pain with him, so he naturally suffered a lot. Ling Han swore in his heart that no matter who it was that had forced his parents to separate, he would ensure that this culprit would pay the price for this crime. Years ago, I too was considered to be one of the geniuses of Rain Country. I was in the prime of my youth, filled with longing for the outside world. After I broke through to the element gathering tier, I left my home to find my own way in the world. 18 years ago, I was searching for an antique relic in Dark Demon Forest, when I accidentally encountered your mother. As Ling Dongxing thought back to his past, his steadfast face could not help revealing a sliver of tenderness, especially when he started to speak of Ling Han's mother. Your mother's name is Yu Hongchong. She was a very beautiful and very gentle woman. Ling Dongxing spoke in a murmur, and his gaze became extremely gentle. However, the first time we met, we had a slight misunderstanding and ended up fighting with each other. After that, we started journeying together and built up a strong, deep affection for one another. When your mother was pregnant with you, we decided to return to Grey Cloud Town, and at that moment, I found out that your mother came from a remarkable background. She was the great-granddaughter of the third elder of Winter Moon Sect. The sect master of Winter Moon Sect was a powerful warrior of the pinnacle of spiritual infant tier. The elders were all in the spiritual infant tier as well. Should any one of them appear, they would be able to easily obliterate our Rain Country. Your mother's elders intended to marry her off to the descendant of another elder of the sect, a man named Aofeng. He was extremely talented in martial arts, so talented that his talent could be claimed to be in defiance of the natural order. However, he was a philandering character. There were hundreds of women around him, and he even had many sons and daughters born out of wedlock. Your mother naturally did not wish to marry such a man, so she left home to get away from her worries, after which she met me, got to know me, and entered into a relationship with me. But eventually, the Winter Moon Sect still discovered your mother's relationship with me, and dispatched elite warriors to capture us. We kept fleeing, and a short while after you were born, your mother's older brother, Xianxia, and Aofeng managed to catch up to us. I will never forget what Aofeng did to me at that time. He broke all my fingers one by one in order to force me to say traitorous words about your mother. However, he was disappointed. Even if I die, How could I ever do anything to hurt Hong Chong? Your mother threatened them by saying that she would end her own life, and with that managed to guarantee the safety of us father and son. But my spirit base was crippled by Aofeng. At first, I was of a mind to storm to the Winter Moon sect and battle to the death. But for your sake, I decided to live out a contemptible life, and so returned to Grey Cloud Town. Ling Han suddenly understood. No wonder Ling Dongxing could easily enter and leave the Purple Lightground Valley, which even elite warriors from Huyang Academy did not manage to enter. His mother must have left some kind of secret treasure with his father that could ensure his survival years ago. Spiritual infant tier. Ling Han lightly frowned. It looks like he would not be able to retrieve his mother in the short term. There were 10 tiers in martial arts, and the spiritual infant tier was the 7th tier. Meanwhile, he had only just stepped onto the 2nd tier, so no matter how he looked at it, it'd take him about 10, 20 years or even more before he managed to achieve the 7th tier. And this was still what he, with his comprehension of the tiers up to Heaven tier, an Immortal grade spirit base, a Heaven grade cultivation technique, and the support of his knowledge as the Alchemy Emperor, could achieve. If it was any other genius, even if they managed to enter the spiritual infant tier within their lifetime, it would still be something that could only be possible after at least 200 or 300 years' time. He had to make full use of his time. That's because there was a limit to the lifespan of a martial artist. If a martial artist did not break through to the Flower Blossom tier, they would enjoy a lifespan no longer than that of a mortal. At best, he would have no pains or illnesses and manage to survive to 100 years old. But should he be able to break through to Flower Blossom tier, then he'd be able to gain an extra 200 years of lifespan, and breaking through to every subsequent tier would reward the martial with another additional 200 years of lifespan. Aofeng. Flames of rage burned strongly in Ling Han's eyes. Although Ling Dongxing had played down what he experienced, Ling Han could imagine how much his father had suffered in the hands of Aofeng on that day, and how much humiliation he had gone through for all his dignity to be lost. If it was not for his sake, Ling Dongxing would definitely have stormed the Winter Moon sect. At worst, he would die. An insult to the father was the same as insulting the son. Ling Han had already sentenced Aofeng to death penalty within his heart. However, as Aofeng was a disciple of the Winter Moon sect, and was even labeled a genius existence, what would his current cultivation level be? Spiritual ocean? Spiritual pedestal? Flower blossom? Honor, although you are very talented, the Winter Moon sect is still a colossal existence to the two of us. You must not act impulsively. Otherwise, I really will not be able to face your mother anymore, Ling Dongxing said after regaining his composure. Ling Han nodded and said, "Please don't worry, father. I will definitely not act impulsively. All my hopes are now on your shoulders. You are not only living for the sake of yourself, but also for the sake of your mother." Ling Dongxing said deeply, "I understand. Right, now that you have broken through to the element gathering tier, you can participate in the Deyuan tournament." Ling Dongxing said, changing the subject. Deyuan tournament? Ling Han searched through the memories in his head and discovered that he did not have any relevant memories regarding this tournament. Ling Dongxing smiled and said, "You had never shown such talent in the field of martial arts before, and so I never spoke of it to you. This Deyuan tournament is a martial arts tournament organized by the Deyuan King's Mansion. Takes place once every 3 years. The requirements for the participants are below 30 years old, cultivation level under Gushing Spring tier, and being a martial artist that belongs within the sphere of control of Deyuan City. In Rain Country, cities were the largest administrative area, and there were 36 great cities all over the country. Every city was responsible for an expansive area. Deyuan City was one of these 36 cities, and the one in charge of the city was called the Deyuan King. He was also a descendant of the founding emperor of Rain Country, as the title of Deyuan City's lord and Deyuan King was passed down through the generations. Under the control of the Deyuan King's Mansion were 4 great powers, which were in charge of their own respective barren areas aside from Deyuan City itself. Stone Wolf Sect was one of them. "What kind of reward will the champion get?" Ling Han asked. Ling Dongxing could not help feeling a little scorn. His son was really quite ambitious to immediately and directly aim for the position of champion. However, this was his excellent son. He thought for a while and said, "It's apparently some kind of spiritual medicine called dark moongrass. It's the chief ingredient for concocting purple origin pill, which can help a martial artist in the element gathering tier easily break through to the gushing spring tier." Ling Han was immediately flabbergasted. The alchemists now, were they all idiots? Dark moongrass is of such high value. How could it be used to concoct a yellow-grade high-level pill? It was the chief ingredient for concocting the spatial pill. The spatial pill could help expand the space within the dantian of a martial artist, and this was something even elite warriors of heaven tier would be deeply jealous of. Such a natural spiritual medicine naturally could let a martial artist in the element gathering tier break through easily and successfully to the gushing spring tier. Its grade was so high that it'd be strange if it did not have this kind of effect. But how wasteful was that? The chief ingredient of purple origin pill could be easily replaced with a lower-grade medicinal ingredient. 10,000 years had passed. Could it be that there was not even the slightest bit of improvement to alchemy, and alchemy had degraded instead? Ling Han broke out in a smile. He could not allow such a precious spiritual medicine to be wasted, so he could only take the dark moon grass. Moreover, his 5 elements origin nuclei expended too much origin power at too fast a pace, and he was just worrying about the limited space within his dantian. And here, the solution came knocking on his door. Still, it was already the end of October now, and there were only about 2 months left before the end of the year, so it did seem to be a bit pressing. Looks like he would have to make a trip to the 7 Wind Mountains, as the inner core of the red-scaled dragon snake could be used to concoct the transcending origin pill. A transcending origin pill would allow the cultivation level of a martial artist in the element gathering tier to forcibly increase by 1 layer, but it was only effective for martial artists in the early stage of element gathering tier. For Ling Han, if he wanted to reach the middle stage of element gathering tier before the year's end, then the transcending origin pill was his only option. However, the red-scaled dragon snake was extraordinarily powerful and its whole body was strongly poisonous. Thus Ling Han needed to make full preparations for this trip. Otherwise, it would be the same as throwing away his life. Father is not trying to attack your self-confidence here, but for every round of Deyuan tournament within the ranks of the participants, there is no lack of powerful warriors in the 9th layer of element gathering tier, and you've just entered the element gathering tier. No matter how extraordinarily gifted you may be, you are still unable to compare with elite warriors in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. Ling Dongxing switched the topic of conversation to advise Ling Han. It's good to have great ambition, but overconfidence was definitely nothing good. Ling Han nodded. Every layer of martial arts was a stage, and every 3 layers was a large stage. There were very few geniuses that could manage to step over this stage and defeat those with higher cultivation levels than their own. He was now only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. How far was his power from that of the 9th layer of element gathering tier? Moreover, there were some who had broken through to the 9th layer of element gathering tier long ago, and although they had not yet broken through to the gushing spring tier, they could still master their martial arts skills to a higher, stronger level. These warriors would naturally have battle strength that was on a completely different level. If he had reached the peak of the 1st layer of element gathering tier, then with the power of the 5 elements origin nuclei, he'd have a high chance of winning even against someone in the middle stage of element gathering tier. But if his opponent was in the late stage of element gathering tier, the chance of Ling Han winning would only be 50-50. After a while, I plan to head to the 7 Wind Mountains for training, Ling Han said. Although he had made this decision some time ago, there was still a need to inform Ling Dongxing of it. Ling Dongxing was instantly shocked. He naturally knew what kind of place the 7 Wind Mountains was. It was a world where demonic beasts rampaged, and there were extremely fearful creatures within the innermost parts of the forest. Thus, even martial artists in spiritual ocean tier dared not venture too deeply. Ling Han was only in the 1st layer of element gathering tier. It was too dangerous for him to enter the 7 Wind Mountains. Besides, there were just 2 months left until the year's end, so even if he went there for a training trip, it wouldn't be possible for him to make much progress anyways. Please don't worry, Father. I will only travel around the outer zone and won't venture too deeply in, Ling Han said, smiling. He truly had no such intention, for the martial artist who had discovered the earth dragon grass was also only in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. He too could not have ventured deeply into the 7 wind mountains. Still, Ling Dongxing could not help but worry. However, he also understood that his son was now a grown-up man, so it was impossible that he would listen to his father on every issue. Thus, he had only given him repeated instructions and advice. Fortunately, Ling Han was not planning to immediately set out for the 7 wind mountains. Father and son conversed a moment longer about their daily lives before Ling Han returned to his room, where he took a bath to wash away the dust accumulated during his travel. He took out and changed into a new suit of clothes, though he felt it was a little tight. He was still in the growing period, and within this month of traveling in the wilds, he not only grew taller, but his physique had also become much sturdier. Thus, when he wore the clothes he had worn in the past, he suddenly felt as if the clothes had shrunk a size. Thankfully, the Ling clan had no lack of money, so Ling Han called for a servant to take his measurements and immediately head to the tailor's to collect some ready-made clothes for him to choose from. But when he spotted Lu Yutong, he could not help once again calling for a servant. Then, he had Lu Yutong announce her measurements as well, so that the servant could collect some clothes for her too. This beautiful little attendant girl would naturally be attending tonight's banquet with him. Very soon, the servant returned with a pile of clothing. There were more than 10 sets of both male and female attire, and Ling Han and Lu Yutong slowly browsed through them. Ling Han very quickly made his choice, but Lu Yutong tried one suit after another. She appeared not to be too satisfied with the suits, yet also seemed to have much interest in every one of them. Lu Yutong finally made her decision right about when the sun was about to set. After she had changed, Ling Han could not help giving a whistle. Truly beautiful. She was already an exquisitely beautiful girl. Now that she had changed into a long lake water green dress, her delicate, well-shaped figure was on full display. Her round breasts, slender waist, slightly uplifted behind, together with a pair of shapely long legs, formed an image of complete femininity. She had even deliberately put on some light makeup, allowing her facial features to be even more distinctly displayed. She really did make a tempting picture. Seeing Ling Han's slightly shocked expression, Lu Yutong could not help feeling a little proud. All this while, she had experienced a lot of shock because of Ling Han, and now that she had finally given him a little payback, she felt very pleased. So much that even the corners of her lips had lifted up in a smile. She was originally an icy beauty. Now, with a smile on her face, it seemed as if the ice had melted and she looked truly lovely and alluring, elegant and graceful. Even Ling Han, with his firm composure, could not help staring. "Let's go." Lu Yutong slightly raised her jade-like chin, creating an attractive arch, making her look a little arrogant. Beauties will be beauties. Every move and action would make an observer carefree and pleased. But when they exited the residence, Lu Yutong still had her beautiful face veiled, and carefully hid her alluring features behind the veil. Ling Han secretly felt this was a bit of a pity, yet at the same time, he felt a little pleased too, for the beautiful face of his little attendant girl could only be admired by him alone. "Oh, right. Do you know of any prominent geniuses in Deyuan City?" Ling Han asked while they were walking. Lu Yutong's steps paused, and she said, "Are you intending to participate in the Deyuan tournament? You're quite smart." Ling Han smiled. Rain Country has a nationwide great tournament that is held once every 3 years. If you manage to get into the top 50 in the Deyuan tournament, then you're guaranteed enrollment within Huyang Academy, Lu Yutong said. This was originally meant to discover geniuses for Rain Country. So that's how it is. Deyuan City was not the only example. If you're talking about geniuses, Lu Yutong pondered for a moment, lightly opened her mouth and spoke. The Imperial City is too far away from here, so I'm not really sure. I only know of one person, because he is also a student of Huyang Academy. And who's that? Ling Han asked casually. Qi Yongyi, the 4th son of the current Deyuan king. Others gave him the nickname King of Eternal Night. He truly is extremely talented, with exceedingly high battle strength. When he was in the 6th layer of Element Gathering tier, he had once killed a warrior in the 8th layer of Element Gathering tier, Liu Tong did not hide her expression of admiration. Killing and defeating were two different matters after all. 3 years ago, he was in the 6th layer of element gathering tier, and he had already gotten the 2nd place in the De Yuan tournament. Now, he should already be in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. This truly was an extremely powerful opponent. Ling Han's battle spirit uplifted. It would be invigorating to trample such a strong opponent. The two of them rendezvoused with Ling Dongxing, and the company of 3 boarded a carriage that set out from the Ling clan residence. Meanwhile, closely following behind them were Ling Zhongquan and his grandson, who had also boarded a carriage of their own. "Father, you still haven't dealt with them?" Ling Han asked. When all is said and done, Ling Zhongquan is still the chief butler. Moreover, he has been running things for so many years that his power is deeply rooted. Although I've managed to remove some of his power, he's not someone I can deal with in a short period of time. Ling Dongxing frowned, looking slightly displeased. This pair of grandfather and grandson actually dared to try to steal the opportunity to enroll in Huyang Academy he had earned for his son. They were truly despicable. Ling Han nodded. In the end, it was still the issue of actual power. If Ling Dongxing was in the Gushing Spring tier, then no matter how bold Ling Zhongquan was, he would not dare have any wild thoughts. The carriage swayed slightly on the way, and after about 20 minutes, they had arrived at the main door to the Chung clan residence. The Chung clan was the other great clan of Gray Cloud Town, so naturally their mansion was not something that common people's real estate could compare to. It occupied a space of a few tens of acres, the high walls of the mansion towering like a giant, creeping beast. Not only the Ling clan was invited to the banquet tonight, for all clans that were even slightly powerful within Gray Cloud Town had all received invitations. Thus, the Chung clan had already spread out a red carpet at their main entrance, with 8 servants standing on either side. Every time a guest arrived, these servants would announce their arrival loudly and clearly, and naturally, there would be someone to come out from the residence to receive the guest. When Ling Han and his companions stepped down from their carriage, immediately, a servant announced loudly, "Noble guest has arrived. Ha ha, Brother Ling. I've waited a long time for you." A middle-aged man stepped out to receive them, raising his clasped hands in the direction of Ling Dongxing. His face was redder than dates, and his figure tall and sturdy. He was the Chung clan head, Chang Wenkuan. "Brother Chang." Ling Dongxing immediately plastered a smile on his face, raising his clasped hands towards Chang Wenkuan in greeting. Come. You're the guest of honor today? I was worried you wouldn't be coming." Chang Wenkuan tugged on Ling Dongxing's arm, presenting an image of cordiality and enthusiasm. "This is Brother Cheng's banquet. How could I not give face to you?" Ling Dongxing laughed loudly. The two of them exchanged words, looking for all the world like a pair of old buddies. Those who didn't know the story would definitely not think that they were archenemies. Either of them wanted nothing more than to see the other dead. Ling Han gave a shrug. He had an utmost dislike for this kind of false politeness. Thankfully, in his last life, he was a genius of alchemy. Thus there were only those who would flatter and curry favor with him, and there was no need for him to do the same with anyone. Chang Wenkuan didn't even glance at Ling Han, as if he did not know that this was the person that had injured his 2 sons, and also the culprit behind the economic war between the 2 clans. "Honor, don't go too far," Ling Dongxing instructed. "Yes, father," Ling Han answered and followed him with Lu Yutong in tow. Under the guidance of Chang Wenkuan, they arrived very quickly at the main hall, where there were about 100 banquet tables. At the moment, there were quite many who were already seated. As there was a name written on every banquet table, an incident of sitting at the wrong table would not happen easily. The one who had made the arrangements for the main hall was a very attentive person, as he had considered the fact that some guests may arrive with female companions. As a result, although there was space for 10 people at every banquet table, there would only be about 5 names written on each. After Ling Han and Lu Yutong found their table, they took their seats. "Young Master Han." There were already 3 others seated at this banquet table. They all greeted Ling Han, their faces filled with respect. They were all young people and also students of Gray Cloud Academy. Not too long ago, They had all witnessed Ling Han display his invincible might and defeat Xianxia and his brother, plus they've also heard the fact that he was in the 7th layer of body refining tier. Thus, they naturally dared not to display the slightest bit of contempt. A 16-year-old in the 7th layer of body refining tier. In Grey Cloud Town, this kind of individual would more than deserve the name of genius. Ling Han smiled in response. After all, they were giving him face so naturally, there was no reason for him to give them the cold shoulder. After a short while, Ling Muyun too took his seat at this table, and while he looked as if he had not seen Ling Han at all, his whole face was stiff. After another short while, Xianxia walked over and also took a seat at this particular table. Ling Han, you're not looking too bad. Xianxia smiled coldly at Ling Han. Ling Han gave him a look over and said, "Hehe. The injuries on your face seem to have recovered quite quickly." Xianxia's face reddened instantly. He considered the fact that he had been publicly defeated by Ling Han a great dishonor. Moreover, he was even forced to beg for mercy. Every time he recalled the incident, he wanted to commit suicide. However, after today, he would be able to completely erase this blemish on his honor and regain his pride. "You can only have this short while to be pleased with yourself," he said, coldly smiling. "Later, you will be kneeling in front of me to beg for my forgiveness. Have you not taken your medicine? Or have you had an overdose?" Ling Han said, smiling. Xianxia did not say anything more, but the corners of his lips lifted up slightly, forming a mysterious smile. The number of guests quickly increased. At first, most of the guests were still freely walking around. After all, this kind of banquet was also a good chance to endear yourself to your betters and to discuss business. But as more and more guests arrived, most sat down in their respective seats to wait for the banquet to begin. The hostile relationship of the Ling clan with the Chung clan was observed by all. They were the two greatest parties in Grey Cloud Town. If Chung clan decided to yield to Ling Han now, then after this, the Ling clan would become the most dominant party in Grey Cloud Town. As a result, there were many guests attending the banquet tonight. They were all here to witness a possibly historical moment. Very soon, Chung Wen-Kuan stood up and waved his hands in various directions, signifying that he had something to say. Most of the guests who had been whispering to each other also ceased their respective conversations, and the main hall became extremely quiet. Was he going to admit defeat to the Ling clan in public? "The reason why I've invited all of you tonight here is to introduce someone to you," Chung Wen-Kuan began. As these words were heard, all those present put on blank expressions. What was going on here? Wasn't the Chung clan supposed to be admitting defeat to the Ling clan? How did this become someone's reception banquet? If they had known earlier, most of the guests would not have attended this banquet. Shua. The attention of the guests all switched focus to Ling Dongxing. Now that the Chung clan has made such a move, then the one bearing the brunt of it would naturally be this clan head of the Ling clan. They wanted to see how he would react. But what invoked disappointment of most of the guests was the fact that Ling Dongxing's face still maintained a serene smile, as if he couldn't care less. Chung Wen-Kuan continued to speak. "This person would be my nephew, Chang Xiao Yuan, who left the clan at 13 years old to become the disciple of one of the elders of Stone Wolf sect. Now that he has become slightly skilled, he has returned for a family visit." Stone Wolf sect. All present experienced shock. The Stone Wolf sect was the overlord within the surrounding 1,000 miles, and held ultimate power over tens of towns, including Grey Cloud Town. They could be considered the ultimate local tyrant. Chung Wen-Kuan suddenly revealing this hidden card obviously meant that he had no plan to admit defeat to the Ling clan. Instead, he was planning to use the Stone Wolf sect to suppress the Ling clan. However, no matter how it was, Chang Xiao Yuan was just a disciple of one of the elders of Stone Wolf sect, so his ability should be quite limited, right? Xiao Yuan has also very fortunately invited a very respected, noble guest. Chung Wen-Kuan was all smiles. This was his real trump card. "Let us welcome Chun Feng Lai, Elder Chun." Elder. An elder of Stone Wolf sect? That was a powerful existence in Gushing Spring tier. Chung Wen-Kuan took the lead in clapping his hands in welcome, and consecutively, the other guests all joined in the applause. At this moment, An old man walked out of the living room and appeared in their midst. He had a medium-sized figure and was clad completely in vermilion. He had a full head of black hair and a rosy complexion that shone with a strange glow. Behind the old man closely followed a young man, who had his hands held at his sides and brow lowered, presenting an image of utmost respect. Without doubt, this old man must be Chun Fenglai, while the young man should be Cheng Xiaoyuan. Chun Fenglai strode towards the host's table and, as if there wasn't anyone else around him, took his seat, appearing extremely arrogant. But no one dared to express disapproval towards this kind of attitude from him, because he was a powerful warrior in Gushing Spring Tier. Even if the man was only in the first layer of Gushing Spring Tier, he'd be able to easily dominate a person in the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier. This was the ironclad rule of martial arts. He did not speak a single word the whole while. In his eyes, this was the natural order of events. There was absolutely no one here that deserved to speak to him. Had Cheng Xiaoyuan not begged and pleaded with him for many days, he would not even deign to show his face at such a setting. Cheng Wenkuan directed a self-satisfied glance at Ling Dongxing. His meaning was more or less, "I've even managed to invite an elder from the Stone Wolf sect here, and you still dare to oppose me?" Cheng Xiaoyuan did not sit with Chun Fenglai at the host's table. Instead, he made his way to sit next to Cheng Xiang grandly. This guy was in the Element Gathering Tier. He should not have broken through too long ago, as he was still in the first layer of Element Gathering Tier. "Young brother Xiang, I heard you had a spar with someone some days ago and lost?" Cheng Xiaoyuan asked Cheng Xiang. "I was less skilled than my opponent, AI." Cheng Xiang gave a deliberate sigh. "Oh." Cheng Xiaoyuan rose a brow and said, "Who did you lose to? I would like to take a look at this person." He's seemingly far away, but actually close at hand." Cheng Xiang's gaze turned towards Ling Han. "So you lost to this young genius?" Cheng Xiaoyuan smiled coldly, also looking at Ling Han, and said in challenge, "Do you dare to have a spar with me?" This pair of cousins continued their pleasant banter. How could the others not see that this was a deliberate challenge aimed at Ling Han? The corners of Cheng Xiang's lips slightly lifted and said loftily, "I forgot to mention, this cousin of mine just broke through to the Element Gathering Tier last year, and now he's about to achieve the peak of the first layer of Element Gathering Tier. It could even be said that he's an exceptional genius." Meanwhile, Cheng Xiaoyuan smiled modestly and said, "I only broke through to the Element Gathering Tier at 20 years old, so I can't really be considered any kind of exceptional genius. I am only one step ahead of most people." When they heard him say this, the others seated at the banquet table all held shocked expressions. Element Gathering Tier. Although Cheng Xiang was in the 9th layer of Body Refining Tier and was only 19 years old, to advance such a big step forward would need at least 3-5 years, or it may not even be achieved in a lifetime. Thus, Cheng Xiaoyuan was being overly modest. Someone who broke through to the Element Gathering Tier at 20 years old definitely deserved the name of a genius. Of course, the praise of exceptional genius was a bit of an exaggeration. After all, Grey Cloud Town was still too small a place, so any person who displayed a slight bit of outstanding talent would be named as genius. The common knowledge of martial arts was that difference of tiers was a gap that was near impossible to breach during fight. Everyone looked at Ling Han, wondering how was this guy going to solve the predicament he was currently facing. If he accepted the challenge, then he would definitely lose. Cheng Xiaoyuan may even kill him with an elder from Stone Wolf sect present. What did he dare not do? But if he did not accept the challenge, then the reputation he had worked so hard to build up would collapse. He was trapped between a rock and a hard place. But if you compare the possible consequences of each decision, then one should understand that refusing the challenge was the wisest move to make. After all, accepting the challenge could possibly result in death. They wanted to shame him. Ling Han's gaze focused on Cheng Xiang before switching to Cheng Xiaoyuan, and he couldn't help the corners of his lips lifting up in a smile. This scheme was quite well planned, but the Cheng clan would never have imagined that he had already advanced into Element Gathering Tier, as well as the fact that his 5-element origin nuclei gifted him with incomparable power. "All right, then let's spar for a bit," he said with a smile. What Ling Han actually agreed. Not only did the others never think of such a thing happening, even Xianxia and his cousin were shocked. But after a while they both smiled coldly. Since this brat was looking for death, then let's give him a hand. If Ling Dongxing could not hold himself back from assisting his son, then Cheng Fenglai too would take action to kill him too. This was what they hoped would happen. The script for tonight's show was to find an excuse to eliminate both Ling Dongxing and Ling Han. Even Ling Muyun could barely conceal the elation he felt. He too wanted nothing more than for Ling Han to die. For clans of martial artists, spars during banquets were something quite common. They only needed to clear some space outside the living room and there was a ready-made battleground. With the deliberate publicizing from Xiang, the news that Ling Han would be having a spar with Cheng Xiaoyuan spread to every table. Additionally, the individual strength of the two fighters, or at least the battle prowess of Cheng Xiaoyuan, was made known to everyone. This was a battle with a conclusion that held absolutely no suspense. Could it be that Ling Han was too proud and arrogant to refuse the challenge? The two fighters stepped into the courtyard outside the main hall. There was an empty space of about 10 meters cleared out here. Although it was not really very wide, it was more than enough for the upcoming battle. You really are an idiot. Cheng Xiaoyuan smiled coldly, killing intent exuding from him. He purposely lowered his voice and said, I will slaughter you. Oh! Ling Han gave a snort. You are really daydreaming. Then die. Cheng Xiaoyuan gave a loud laugh, his fist flying towards Ling Han. He had no need to use any kind of martial arts skill. He fully believed that, with the strength of a warrior at the peak of the first layer of element gathering tier, he would be able to easily crush Ling Han. There was a saying in martial arts which meant that enough strength would subdue 10 rounds of battle. Under the pretext that there was too great a gulf between two fighters' respective strengths, there was absolute no need for any kind of martial arts techniques. Ling Han held no fear as he too responded with a fist flying towards Cheng Xiaoyuan. With everyone fixing their eyes on them, the two fists crashed into one another, and a powerful ripple suddenly erupted, radiating out in all directions. Pong 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 pong. A few of those who stood the closest suddenly collapsed. Meanwhile, Ling Han and Cheng Xiaoyuan were still maintaining their previous stances, their two fists pushing against each other. What? Seeing such a scene, everyone was greatly shocked, their faces filled with utter disbelief. Some who had been eating immediately spat out what they had been eating, accidentally covering the faces of those who had been so unfortunate as to sit opposite. For a short moment, the scene was one of complete chaos. Ling Han actually countered Cheng Xiaoyuan with a fist, and it even seemed like their power was evenly matched. How could this be possible? Cheng Xiaoyuan's arrogant expression had completely disappeared as he said, deeply frowning, element gathering tier? Ling Han smiled faintly and said, You're not the only one who can break through. In truth, almost everyone had already guessed it, but when they heard Ling Han's confirmation, a new wave of shocked exclamations still emerged. Previously, when Cheng Xiaoyuan broke through to the element gathering tier at 20 years old, he was already praised as an exceptional genius, yet now Ling Han was only 16 years old. 16 years old and in the element gathering tier? Gods, this was crazy. Everyone turned gazes full of incomprehension towards Ling Han. This guy was a publicly acclaimed trash just more than a month ago. How did he, in such a short time, reverse his fortunes? Brother Ling, you truly have a wonderful son, Chang Wenkuan said in an awe-inspiring tone, his voice failing to conceal his killing intent. A 16-year-old boy who had already achieved the element gathering tier was much too terrifying. He was even more talented than Ling Dongxing had been years ago in the past. He had always compared himself with Ling Dongxing, but no matter how much effort he expended, the gulf between himself and Ling Dongxing only became wider and wider, until the moment when Ling Dongxing returned to Grey Cloud Town. His strength stagnated in the 9th layer of element gathering tier. This was what finally gave him a chance to catch up to him. But he had never imagined that Ling Han's talent was even more prominent. He definitely could not allow this brat to live. Otherwise, perhaps in a few years' time, this brat could even possibly break through to Gushing Spring tier, and at that moment the Cheng clan could only bow beneath the might of the Ling clan. Ling Dongxing smiled faintly. In the past, His son had caused him much heartache. Yet now, Ling Dongxing only felt immeasurably proud of him. He said, "Just so, still can't compare to your clan's Xiao Yuan, who had already broken through a year ago. Damn it, how could a 20-year-old who broke through compare with a 16-year-old who broke through?" Within the courtyard, Cheng Xiao Yuan took a deep breath, yet his heart was filled with overwhelming shock. He had heard Chang Xiang mention before that Ling Han was only in the 7th layer of body refining tier just over a month ago, and yet he had astonishingly broken through to element gathering tier now. This progression rate was really much too horrifying. Could it be that this brat had some kind of treasure that allowed him to speed up his cultivation rate? When he thought about this, his eyes instantly lit up. It must be this brat's reputation as a piece of trash was well known all over town. But he had, all of a sudden, turned so powerful. It must have been that he had obtained some kind of colossal opportunity. Well, it belongs to me now. Thinking of this, Cheng Xiao Yuan opened up his fists, revealing his palms. He intended to use a martial arts technique. Earth-shaking palm, yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique. This was a technique he had obtained when he had been on a training trip at a historical site. It not only allowed him to have an additional powerful secret art, but when he handed it over to the Stone Wolf sect, he had also been rewarded with a origin gathering pill, which helped him to break through to element gathering tier in one go. Otherwise, there was no way he would have been able to break through to element gathering tier when he was 20 years old. He was filled with confidence. A yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique was considered top-rate even in Stone Wolf sect. The martial arts techniques that had been passed down through the Ling and Chung clans were only yellow-grade medium-level martial arts techniques at best. He fully believed that once he used earth-shaking palm, he would still be able to easily control the situation. Ling Han raised his fists, a fearful aura erupting from him. Dashing Panther Fist, yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique. He had been practicing his sword skills these few days, so there was naturally not much progress in regards to his fist techniques. However, this fist technique was retained from his last life, so he would naturally not be unfamiliar with it. Even if it had not reached the point where he had mastered this fist technique, he had still reached the level that would take any other person tens of years of practice to reach. After all, when it came down to it, the prowess he had once possessed as a martial artist in Heaven tier didn't disappear without a trace. When he used this fist technique, it was as if he transformed into a panther on the hunt, cruel, bloodthirsty, and terrifying. Pung, pung, pung. Ling Han had already engaged Cheng Xiao Yuan in a fierce battle of strength. What kind of fist technique is this? The Ling clan has 3 ultimate martial arts techniques. One is a sword art, one is a staff technique, and the last one is a palm technique. They don't have any fist technique. Could it be that this is a yellow-grade low-level martial arts technique? But would a yellow-grade low-level martial arts technique have such great power? Everyone was gasping in surprise, all astounded by the strength Ling Han had displayed. Cheng Xiao Yuan's heart was filled with incomprehension. He had already used a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique, but why was he still unable to overwhelm Ling Han? Could it be that a minor character from this insignificant gray cloud town had also managed to obtain a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique? Impossible. That's definitely impossible. They had only exchanged a few blows, yet the pressure on Cheng Xiao Yuan grew larger and larger. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead. The reason was the power behind his opponent's every punch seemed to be continuously increasing, making it seem as if this guy had just learnt this fist technique, and as he continued to use it more and more, the power behind his attacks too increased further. Actually, he wasn't mistaken. It was the truth. Dashing Panther Fist was a martial arts technique Ling Han had used before reaching Gushing Spring tier in his last life. He had not used it for a very long time, and now that he had picked it up again, he was naturally out of practice. However, a genius would always be a genius. They had only been battling for a while, and Ling Han had already come into his own, and was slowly displaying the power behind this fist technique. A yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique theoretically would be able to increase the user's battle strength by 70 to 100%. However, how much actual power would actually be released depended on the martial artist's grasp and comprehension of this martial arts technique. Otherwise, a yellow-grade high-level martial arts technique may not even be able to compare with a yellow-grade low-level martial arts technique. Chang Xiao Yuan could release about 80% of the power behind Earth-Shaking Palm, yet Ling Han could release 90% of the power of his own martial arts technique, and the amount of power he released was still increasing. In this manner, Chang Xiao Yuan was naturally at a disadvantage, and it was becoming more and more obvious. This was Ling Han's ability, and he had only just stepped into Element Gathering Tier. Had he reached the peak of the first layer of Element Gathering Tier, he'd be able to evenly match an opponent in the 5th layer of Element Gathering Tier. Genius! Who would have thought that the trash from the Ling clan was actually such a genius? It's really inconceivable. Since he's such a genius, why had he been so low-key in the past? Let me tell you a secret. When Ling Dongxing returned to the Ling clan residence years ago, he was completely covered in blood, holding an infant in his arms. You mean Ling Dongxing had been hunted down by some powerful martial artist, and that's why he and his son had kept such a low profile? But then, why has Ling Han chosen to erupt now? You ask me. And whom should I ask? Previously, although Ling Han had defeated both Cheng Xiang and his brother within the grounds of Grey Cloud Academy, it made only a vague impression on the minds of most people. After all, there was only a limited number of students who had actually witnessed the scene. But the situation was completely different now. Ling Han had not only broken through to Element Gathering Tier, but had also displayed a remarkably powerful battle prowess, pushing his image to new heights. After all, in Grey Cloud Town, those who had actually broken through to the Element Gathering Tier would enter the ranks of the strongest warriors. Ling Han continued to throw out his fists, and soon, what appeared to be an unknown fist technique became more and more practiced. His moves quickly became stronger and stronger, nearing a complete 100% of power released. Fist techniques were analogous to sword arts as they could form fist chi, which could consecutively solidify into fist ray. According to legends, in ancient times, when a star fell from the skies, a powerful warrior stepped forward bravely, and with one fist, shattered the star. This powerful warrior was an elite martial artist that had mastered fist techniques. Moreover, he had not only managed to form fist ray, but had also grasped the highest mastery level of fist techniques, fist heart. Similarly, the highest mastery level of sword arts was sword heart, while for saber arts it was saber heart. Ling Han did not have such high talent in fist techniques. He had not even managed to form fist chi. After all, he was better at sword arts. However, even his current level of fist techniques was more than enough to deal with Chang Xiao Yuan. He used exiting cloud step, making it seem as if his figure was floating. Those in body refining tier could only feel the sight in front of their eyes blurring, as if they had seen several images of Ling Han and had completely no way to identify which one was the real one. Pong! 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 He was completely at an advantage. Chang Xiao Yuan only managed to block a part of his continuous barrage of fists, and some blows had already found their targets on his body. Although no vital parts of his body were hit, Chang Xiao Yuan still felt pain on a level that almost caused him to tear up. Ling Han had completely no intention of holding back. This guy had obviously already planned to kill him and thus anger Ling Dongxing, causing him to lose control in his rage, which in turn would enrage Chen Fenglai. Thus, they would easily have a ready-made excuse to kill both him and his father. Since Chang Xiao Yuan was so malicious, why should he hold himself back? One fist followed after another, and the speed of his attacks rapidly increased, slowly forming a flash of fist chi. With every sweep of a fist, there would definitely appear a splatter of blood on Chang Xiao Yuan's body. Fist chi, like sword chi, was incomparably powerful. At the highest mastery level, there was nothing in this world that cannot be shattered with one fist. What is that? Such a terrifying attack power. That's true. It's as if he had fixed an exceptionally amazing sword onto his fist. I know that's fist chi. What's fist chi? Sword, saber, fist, palm, and so on. One who puts their entire focus on one path would be able to form chi, which greatly increases the power of a martial artist. How is it I've never heard about this before? That's because there are only a very rare few that can actually form chi. They have been acclaimed as the rulers amongst martial artists. Everyone was shocked at the power Ling Han had displayed, and with the helpful explanation from a knowledgeable old man, they realized the terrifying strength of fist chi. Naturally, they were even more astonished. Could it be that an exceptional genius was going to appear from within the ranks of Grey Cloud Town? Meanwhile, there was no one more astonished than Lu Yutong, because she knew that Ling Han had not only managed to form fist chi, but had also formed sword chi before this, and actually possessed 4 flashes of sword chi. What kind of monster was this guy? Yet, Ling Han took no pride in his achievement. As one who had been a strong warrior of heaven tier, being able to form chi was merely within his expectations. The slight difficulty would be when he tries to form chi into ray, and heart would be the actual real challenge. Killing intent flashed within his eyes, and his fist flew out all of a sudden. The power behind it had instantly increased by several times. With Chun Fenglai overseeing things in a normal situation, it would be very difficult for him to kill Chang Xiao Yuan, as Chun Fenglai would definitely take action to stop him. Thus, he had to kill Chang Xiao Yuan in one move. After such a long battle, he could naturally identify his opponent's weak point. Additionally, he had not used his full power previously, conserving his strength for this last killing move. No! Chang Xiao Yuan's face was filled with terror. The power behind this fist was too much. He had no way of blocking it and coming out alive. Pang! A fist flashed out, and Chang Xiao Yuan gazed at Ling Han blankly. Pa! His legs grew soft, and he knelt on the ground as his upper body swayed before he toppled loudly onto the ground. His heart had exploded, and he was dead. How dare you, brat! Chun Fenglai suddenly stood, and flames of rage burned strongly within his eyes. Chang Xiao Yuan was his disciple only in name, but no matter how it was, he was still a proud member of Stone Wolf sect. He was not someone the young master of a tiny little clan in Grey Cloud Town could kill. His killing intent surged out completely. The pride of Stone Wolf sect could not be tarnished. He wanted to kill Ling Han. Old man, if you don't want to die, then I advise you not to have any wild thoughts, Ling Han said deeply, as he turned to look at Chun Fenglai. Everyone on the scene bore the same thought. Ling Han had gone mad. He killed a disciple of Stone Wolf sect first, and now he's threatening Chun Fenglai. How bold was he? Stone Wolf sect was the overlord within the radius of 1,000 miles. Compared with such a powerful entity, no matter if it was the Ling clan or the Chung clan, neither clan had the qualifications to be compared with it on the same level. Was Ling Han deliberately seeking his own demise? Chun Fenglai was startled for a moment, for he had been shocked by Ling Han's gaze. It was as deep and as vast as the ocean, filled with dignity, as if it belonged to a supreme warrior. However, he quickly realized that he had actually been threatened by a mere martial artist in element-gathering tier, and could not help laughing, and deeply said, "Oh, and how do you plan to kill me? I don't need to do anything. Within 5 days you'll die anyway," Ling Han said calmly, and pointed a finger at Chun Fenglai. "About 10 days ago, when you were cultivating, did you encounter some trouble?" Chun Fenglai's expression instantly changed. Just as Ling Han had said while he had been cultivating 10 days ago, he suddenly felt as if he had comprehended something, and decided to break through to the 4th layer of Gushing Spring tier, yet did not succeed. On the contrary, he accidentally caused the origin power within his body to enter the wrong pathways, but thankfully he managed to withdraw in time, and so there was not too much damage done. How did this brat know that? Had he guessed? Ling Han smiled, and said, "Try to press on the spot 3 inches below your left ribs." Chun Fenglai's first natural reaction was to say, "How preposterous!" But his hand could not help moving and pressing down on the spot 3 inches below his left ribs. With a light touch, his entire expression changed once again. Pain, excruciating pain, and the spot 1/2 inch to the right of the 7th bone of your spinal column, Ling Han continued to say. Chun Fenglai once again touched that exact spot, and cold sweat appeared on his forehead. This was definitely not normal. "You overdid it when you were cultivating. You don't sense anything wrong, because you were still in that state of madness?" Ling Han said, before revealing a confident smile. "I can save you." Chun Fenglai clenched his teeth and said, "Fine. You teach me how to cure myself, and I will forgive your sin this time. Elder Chun. Cheng Wenkuan was both shocked and enraged. Wouldn't that mean that Cheng Xiao Yuan had died for nothing then? And Chun Feng Lai turned his glare towards Cheng Wenkuan, his eyes filled with malevolence. How could a minor character like Cheng Xiao Yuan compare to the importance of his own life? Cheng Wenkuan hurriedly shut up, cold sweat beading on his forehead. To actually dare to talk back to a strong warrior in gushing spring tear, he would die a meaningless death. Yet Ling Han only shook his head and said, "In any case, you're in the gushing spring tear, and yet your life is only worth so much?" Chun Feng Lai's heart was filled with fury, but as his life was held in the hands of another, he could not allow himself to display any of his rage. He could only suppress the flames of anger and say, "Then what do you want?" Ling Han smiled softly and said, "That will depend on your performance." Chun Feng Lai was extremely depressed. He was the 9th elder of Stone Wolf Sect and a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring Tear. Under normal circumstances, he would be the one standing at the top, holding court over others. When did he become someone that could be easily manipulated by a puny, little martial artist in element gathering tier? But what else could he do? His life was held in Ling Han's grasp. From the moment Ling Han had accurately pointed out the day he had experienced trouble in his cultivation, and through the agony he felt when he pressed down on the 2 acupuncture points, he no longer held any doubt and fully believed Ling Han's words. "Do you have any commands then, young Master Han?" He lowered his stance. "Pooh!" Hearing the words young Master Han, all the observers immediately gasped in shock. That was an actual elder from Stone Wolf Sect, a real warrior in the Gushing Spring Tier, and he actually addressed Ling Han as young Master Han. How could this not induce astonishment? Ling Han revealed a soft smile and said, "Are you planning to get the method of solution and then kill me? How could that be?" Chun Feng Lai hurriedly gave a dry laugh, yet he had already started sweating. Ling Han's heart was clear. He naturally would not allow himself to be in danger. He would cure Chun Feng Lai, but would definitely not cure him entirely in one go. He pointed at Cheng Wenkuan and said, "This man annoys me. Thrash him for me." Cheng Wenkuan's face instantly turned green. The reason why he had invited Chun Feng Lai was to gain a powerful support for himself so as to resolve the problem of Ling Dongxing's closing in on them at every step, causing the stagnation of the finances of the Cheng clan and leading to the entire clan being forced into a corner. But he had never imagined that this helper he had invited would actually turn around to help the Ling clan. How could he not be sullen at this? If anyone were to give him a piece of tofu now, he would definitely knock himself to death with it. "Senior Chun," he stuttered, in front of a powerful warrior of Gushing Spring Tier. His cultivation level of the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier was practically helpless. "En? Are you planning to fight back against me?" Chun Feng Lai said coldly. Cheng Wenkuan had no relationship with him anyways, so naturally, he had absolutely no conflicted feelings about giving the guy a good thrashing. He had already bowed his head to Ling Han just now, so he might as well just go ahead and throw caution to the wind. Cheng Wenkuan's expression changed multiple times, before he finally just gritted his teeth and said, "I dare not." If he dared resist, he would definitely die. Even a blind man could tell that Chun Feng Lai was extremely unhappy now. "Pa! Pa!" Chun Feng Lai raised his hand and lowered it, gifting Cheng Wenkuan with 2 slaps. The strength behind his blows caused blood to stain the corners of Cheng Wenkuan's lips. There was complete silence in the main hall. The only thing disturbing the silence was the harsh breathing of the audience. Who would have thought that things would play out in this manner? Even Ling Dongxing had never imagined that his son was so capable as to be able to control a powerful warrior in Gushing Spring Tier, causing him to be both shocked and comforted. He truly had a good son. The faces of Cheng Xiang and his brother kept twitching. If there was a hole in the ground now, they would really want to go and hide in it. They had been so confident and arrogant previously, thinking that they could now regain their lost pride. They had never expected that even their old man would be thrashed now. The banquet tonight could practically be added to the Cheng clan's history of dishonor. Even when Cheng Wenkuan spat out a tooth and swallowed blood due to the thrashing, he still dared not display the slightest anger on his face. Still, no matter how shrewd he was, There was no way he could still put on a carefree expression. The veins on his forehead were protruding, showing that he was obviously at the deepest levels of his fury. Ling Clan, I swear, I will definitely destroy you until nothing is left. He roared angrily within his heart. As long as third uncle successfully breaks through to gushing spring tear, we will definitely be able to avenge ourselves. Ling Han nodded and said to Chun Feng Lai, I will write a medicine formula for you, which will help you suppress your injuries temporarily. You will not have any trouble for half a year's time. Though Chun Feng Lai did not want to accept this, he also knew that Ling Han would definitely not cure him completely in one go if it were him. He too would have reservations. After all, Ling Han was the weaker party here. He could thus only nod, and said, Many thanks, young Master Han. As things have already played out to this step, the banquet was obviously at an end. Staying any longer would only be awkward. The guests excused themselves one after another while Ling Han left the Chong clan residence in the company of Ling Dongxing and Lu Yutong after handing over the medicine formula to Chun Feng Lai. Ha 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 ha. On the carriage, the hearty laughter that Ling Dongxing had tried so hard to hold back was finally released. He waved a fist vigorously and said, I have competed with Chung Wen Kuan for over half of my life, but I have never released my pent-up anger like tonight. However, Honor, tonight was still quite dangerous. Had Chun Feng Lai not experienced trouble in his cultivation some days ago, the matter tonight would not have been resolved so easily. After all, a disciple of Stone Wolf sect had died tonight. Ling Han smiled. If he had not noticed that there was something wrong with Chun Feng Lai, he would still have two alternatives to choose from. The first alternative was naturally simple, to not kill Chang Xiao Yuan, while the second alternative was to still kill Chang Xiao Yuan, but reveal Lu Yutong's identity to take care of the issue. But he no longer needed to consider this problem now. One more month, and the Chung clan would not even be able to pay the salaries of their own guards. At that time, it'll be our Ling clan who will be the sole power in Gray Cloud Town, Ling Dongxing declared proudly and enthusiastically.